Welcome to the Bear Hug Experience, where we cozy up to the fire in our digital den and immerse ourselves in the inspiration born from exploring the hidden narratives and inevitable plot twists that shape every compelling startup journey. Join us as we showcase inspirational guests from bold investors with the Midas touch to pioneering entrepreneurs at the helm of today's most thrilling startups. We'll also hear from courageous go-to-market leaders navigating the frontier of emerging tech and the unsung heroes bringing all the people and parts together to form unstoppable dream teams. Here's your host, Kraig Ward, founder and managing director of Bear Hug Recruiting. Get ready for an insightful journey.
The following is a conversation with Nev Hyman, a serial entrepreneur who's a legendary pioneer in the world of surfboard manufacturing, who went on to build a global surfboard empire under the NEV Futureshapes brand. He set 4 Guinness World Records and more recently won Pitch at Palace, becoming the Worldwide Entrepreneur of the Year thanks to his recent endeavor where he's helping to solve the world's plastic waste problem at its source by converting waste into safe, affordable, eco-friendly building materials to be used for constructing homes, schools, medical clinics, and more in both developed and developing nations around the world. Welcome to the Bear Hug Experience. And now, dear friends, fellow entrepreneurs, investors, and startup enthusiasts, here is Nev Hyman. All right. Nev, how are you?
Good, Craig. How you going, buddy?
I'm going well. I'm really excited for this, so thanks for coming on the show.
Oh, it's my pleasure. My fond memory of us is running up that hill in San Francisco when you were there and you almost killing me pretending to be as fit as you.
That's right. I have so many fond memories of the day that we met there and the times we had together. That was amazing. So yes.
Yeah.
Well, we should clarify for the audience, you're calling in from where exactly? I mean, they can probably tell by your accent, but
Yeah.
what time is it and where are you right now?
It is. It's just 6:20 and it's the beautiful Gold Coast of Australia. I used to have an address living here and it was 10 Surfers Avenue, Mermaid Beach, Surfers Paradise, Gold Coast, Australia. That is completely true. That was
Oh my
my
God.
address on my business card. It's stunning here.
So we can all Google it and see your prior
Absolutely.
residence.
I've been traveling the world since day, and every time I come home, I go, I know home is where the heart is. You know, there's no question of that. But every time I come home, I go, oh my God, you're kidding me. This place is unbelievable. It's the best place on the planet.
I've never been to Australia. My wife has spent a year there when she had her study abroad. But I can't compete with that old address other than to say I lived on Whale Watch Way one time in La Jolla, California.
Yeah.
So that's
Oh,
that's as close as I can get. We could watch
I
the
love La
surfers
Jolla.
down below.
Oh,
Yeah.
no, absolutely. La Jolla, I love La Jolla. I spent a fair bit of time down in there in the early 80s. That was great.
Well, why don't we tell our listeners in just a short little summary, what are you up to these days?
Well, I'm trying to save the bloody planet, and I'm rejigging my brand. So my brand being Nev Surfboards or Nev Futureshapes, I've had since 1980. Started making surfboards in 1973, but so I've had this brand for a long time, and and when I say saving the planet, that sounds a little over the top, but the world is talking about what they should be talking about CO2, about waste, and I've been on a journey for quite a while, for 10 or 12 years, fine-tuning a solution, and we'll get into that. But the solution is simply dealing with waste. And to start off, to align those two things, I want to tell you a funny little story, is that in my heyday of making surfboards, I used to go to all the trade shows, especially in the US, in Orlando and in San Diego, the ASR and the Surf Expo trade shows, and had my booth there, and I was showing off my surfboards and my things, and there was always, being younger, and there was always a a whole bunch of beautiful girls next door in the bikini section next door, and it was just a place where visually it was just over the top and so much fun. A few years ago, I found myself at a trade show, at a waste management trade show in Sydney, and I'm walking around the trade show, and all I saw were unusual looking people in trucker hats, and I'm going, what happened to my life? You know, it's like not fair. Why am I at I want to go back to the past where the trade shows were, you know, visually interesting.
So we're trying to save the planet and another endeavor at the same time. What is it that is your superpower that's going to allow you to take that on?
Yeah, that's I had a number of sayings in my surfboard business, and they were around my name, Nev, and never. So never, with an A, never give up, never say never, never look back. And that might sound a bit corny, and there is a story behind those comments, which we'll talk about later, quite a funny story. But the point is that I know I have a level of resilience. One of my shareholders in Nev House said to me, "You are the most resilient bastard I've ever met in my life, Nev." And that's not a boast. That's basically just saying that I just simply do not give up. I don't care what you throw at me. I don't care unless it compromises my integrity. If I am on a journey, I will continue to do it. It's just like riding a wave. It's like surfing. You know, when you're out there and you've just had a good wave and you're paddling back out again and you can't get back out. You can't punch through that shore break. You can't get through the middle break, and you're duck diving and you're trying to get out and you're going and you just want to turn around and paddle in. So that analogy is like what life is all about. And I know we all have an element of that, but I just simply won't give up. That's my kryptonite.
I was going to say that's a follow-on question I always ask people here at the beginning. Oftentimes, our kryptonite is our strength to a fault,
Yeah.
the unwillingness to give up. So, what is it that you would label? Is it just the flip side of that? That is the the one thing that wears you down or sucks your energy while you're on this path to make a difference in the world?
Oh, sometimes it's the imposter syndrome, where you feel that, why am I doing this? Like, is there something wrong with me? Why am I continuing to pursue that when people around me are saying, why don't you just go down this road? Why don't you back away from that and spend more energy over there? Why don't you focus on one thing? You know, my whole mindset. I was recently diagnosed as high functioning ADHD. I know everybody gets diagnosed these days as that, but my point being is that when I focus on something, and someone tells me you're focused on too many things, my philosophy is that you've got to throw the net out wide. The net's got to be so wide that there's a percentage, there's a probability that one of those things that you catch, one of those fish, is going to turn into something really good. So you do need to be out there. But what bothers me is when people say, I'm not an academic. I can't focus on one thing and leave others. I must keep my net out wide. So what brings me down is maybe others suggesting that I should focus, Nev. No, I've got to keep my net out wide. I'm not a detailed person. I'm a big thinker. And we all have different ways in dealing with life. And my personality is a macro thinker. I'm not a micro thinker. I'm not a detailed person. My brother Graham, he is an academic, and he is like the yin and the yang. I'm not sure which one's right, but he's so detailed it's ridiculous, and I'm so big picture. And how does that happen? The DNA of that. Why did my
Mm-hmm.
brother become the yin and I was the yang, or vice versa? It's amazing.
Yeah, what a trip. Well, hopefully there's some collaboration there. I mean, even if it was
Oh,
just
there is.
being brothers in the same family.
No, he works with
Um,
us, which is great.
well, that's great. Well, Nev, why don't we kind of go back to the beginning? I'm gonna do something that I think is kind of fun. Actually, I do this with all my candidates within usually the first 5 minutes of having a conversation out of the blue with people that I call for Bear Hug recruiting. I will call people up. I'll warm them up to talking to me, and then I'll challenge them to tell me their story in 5 minutes with a
Right.
cap.
Yeah.
So I'm going to ask you to do the same thing. I find it really interesting to see when somebody is given a forced time constraint.
Mm.
Um, you've lived a very elaborate and wild life with all the things that you've done. But if you were to try to compress that into 5 minutes, if you look at the clock, and I'll
Mm.
let you hold yourself to your own time frame, I want to see
Mm.
what comes out if you just riff for 5 minutes and tell us your story from the very beginning,
Mm.
whatever details you want to share from the very beginning of your life up until the
Mm.
present day. Let's see what happens with that. Are you
Okay.
game?
Yeah. 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 Sure.
Let's do it.
So my name's Neville. My mum named me Neville. I'm a ginger. I'm a redhead, and I was raised in a housing commission home in Western Australia. I actually, over the years, as a youngster, just had no confidence, zero confidence, and I started surfing at 9 years old, and it was like, wow, maybe. And as I grew, surfing pulled me out of my personality that I felt that I wasn't worthy. And then as I started making surfboards, people started there was a bit of a tension, and all of a sudden, bang, 12, 13, 14 girls are starting to be interested in this little ranger. And I started making surfboards at school. Then I got the attention of the teachers that, hey, this young man's got some entrepreneurial skills here. Started making surfboards in my dad's garage. And then, um, you know, based on the fact that I had this fantastic family, the best parents on the planet, um, those entrepreneurial skills got me into a situation where I was making surfboards. And the day I left high school, bang, I'm opening a surfboard factory with my best friend Phil Usher, and for 2 or 3 years, bang, I'm experiencing all the trauma, the trauma of being in business, at such a young age, at 16, 17, and having to have to pay out a shareholder, and not a shareholder, a partner, $3,000 in 1975, which was a lot of money. I'm learning all these lessons. It's such a young age. And I think about it now, and I look at young people and I go, wow, isn't it amazing how young people, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, back in those days, it sounds, actually achieved a lot, did a lot. And it doesn't seem to happen as much now. And maybe that's not true, but, you know, by the time that I was 17, 18, I'm going, I want to rule the world. I'm not going to be able to do that in Perth, Western Australia, one of the most remote places, remote cities on the planet. So I packed up everything in my Jeep 4-wheel drive and drove to Queensland, drove to Burleigh Heads, set up my surfboard factory there, met my girlfriend, and and just began life again at such a young age, making surfboards in Queensland, in the middle of the world of making surfboards. There was an event called the Stubby Surfing Event. I met all the world's best pro surfers. So surfing was completely my life, completely focused on surfing waves, going around the world, going to pristine places that hadn't been surfed before. Then that developed over and over again into a position where I started getting international recognition for making surfboards because I was traveling a lot. And but these are all lessons in life, and I learnt very quickly to never give up, to just keep going. And I've had the benefit of being focused on one business opportunity, and that is making surfboards. I eventually rolled all the way through that into having surfboard factories all over the world, traveling. And as I'm traveling, I'm surfing all these pristine places around the world, like in islands off the coast of New Caledonia once, and seeing plastic in the environment. I'm going, what's going on here? Has a boat gone down? There's all this plastic on the beach. This is way before anybody knew anything about global warming and the Pacific gyres of all the plastic. And that eventually rolled into, I had a very successful business, and I was making a lot of money, and I had a beautiful beachfront home and a family with young kids. Went through a divorce, which wasn't very pretty. And then I came out the other side of that going, I want to do something. So I invested in a plastics recycling company, as you do. So over
Yeah.
time, I realized maybe I could do something good here. And then eventually, no one's got a crystal ball. That's the other thing in life. No one knows what's going to happen next. And the greatest plans made in heaven, whatever that saying says, they started falling apart. And I had to then fight. I had to fight for this company, this plastics recycling company, whilst I was building this other company called Firewire surfboards. So I'm doing all of this. Now I'm in the position where I'm in legal issues. So I'm learning another lesson in life. When things don't go right, you have legal issues. Did all that, came out the other side. Here I am, sitting out in a beautiful morning on the Gold Coast. Everything's beautiful. My businesses are both growing again. It's almost sometimes you have to start again, but if you've got a good foundation, you can grow it again. And at the moment, I'm growing these two incredible opportunities to give joy to people that like to be in the water, to be out in the ocean, and to bring some solution to what everybody's talking about, which is plastic in the environment or waste.
So you started your first business almost by accident, it sounds like. You fell in love with surfing. You said that you started surfing at around age 9. You said your brother was older than you were?
Yeah, 3 years older.
Okay. Did he get you into surfing?
No, that's a really good point. It's quite funny. My brother's the tall, dark, and handsome guy, and I'm the little ginger in the family. And I'm not knocking myself too much. But it's like, how come he got all the DNA and I didn't? That was even. I was thinking that as I was growing up. He's a really handsome guy, and like ducks of the school and all that sort of stuff, and but he was a great sportsman too. He loved his basketball and cricket and things, and I didn't feel like I was good at anything. Then I started. I love the ocean. My dad was, we loved to snorkel and free dive in Perth, and loved that fishing and things. So I was always around the ocean. But when I started surfing, my brother didn't, and he maintained his progress and his direction, and in the period when I started surfing, it was the very early '70s, and that's when everybody was going like a surfer. You're kidding? Aren't they all drug addicts? They're dropouts.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And my parents, my lovely mum and dad, when I asked to get a surfboard for Christmas in 1970 or whenever it was, they bought me a skin diving wetsuit. And I went, I was so bummed. And then I went, hang on a sec, there's something good about this. I
Uh-huh.
needed a wetsuit. Oh, you blew it, Mum and Dad. I've got a wetsuit now. Now I'm going to surf when it's cold. So
Uh,
it was gold. And my mum and I used to laugh about it. She passed away last year at 95, so we still used to laugh about it. But the point is that Graham never took up surfing, and I did, and from that my pathway went this way, his went that way, but and I wish he did, because surfing is a gift. You could say that about any sport or any activity, but there's something about surfing that when it puts you in the environment, and it is,
mm-hmm.
you heal when you paddle out and duck dive the first wave, and you penetrate
Mm-hmm.
that wave, and the water rushes
Mm-hmm.
over your back, and you pop out the other back of the wave, and you look up and you see the sun and other people having fun. The world completely and utterly disappears. You cannot even think about anything else. And Sean Thompson, the famous surfer, once said, time literally stands still when you're surfing. And what he actually meant by that was when you're in the tube, when you're inside the wave, when you see guys disappearing inside the wave and coming out,
Mm-hmm.
time does stand still. I don't even think the mind can think about anything else. And
Mm-hmm.
there's probably a million iterations of that in other activities. Yeah, I'm not
Yeah.
trying, but there is something about surfing. There's something about being in the ocean, riding waves, riding a thing that generates thousands of miles away, and this pulse that travels across the ocean. And it's not like golf. And I'm sitting here on a golf course. You can go, I want to go and have a round of golf. I want to go and hit some balls. You can't do that with surfing. You go
Mm-hmm.
down the beach and the tide's not right, or the wind's direction's this, that, or it's too big, it's too small. It's a challenge. So, yeah.
Well,
It's a
I
gift.
love that I love that you mentioned that it improved your self-worth by getting into
Oh,
surfing. So, and I can understand how having a thing that would connect you to the earth in that way, that would feel
yeah.
so cleansing and help you feel so connected, um, could just give you a sense of that autonomy and that freedom and that control and that power. And I can just imagine all those things could come out of that. And then
Well,
you had the
well,
wetsuit. Yeah.
it doesn't come from at a young age. I was oblivious to that. At a young age, though, for me personally, feeling no self worth, and I'm serious. My mum used to say, Neville used to lock yourself in your room and not come out for hours. You know, like you were scared of the world. And I said, Mum, well, you name me Neville is like a boy named Sue. You know, how am I supposed to get ahead? But what happened was, and as I said earlier, you know, I was in the garage making surfboards because I'm good with my hands and creative, and then I get people became friends with me because I made surfboards. I mean, I was in a non-surfing school. There was only three other surfers in the school, but you know, 12 or 13 or 14, you know, and it was all about girls, of course, and your buddies, and they're going, oh, can
Hmm.
we come by too? So they come by my dad's garage, and I'd be out there, and people are looking at me, and I'm a kid, right? But I could recognise at the time my peers were looking at me with a level of, well, interest.
So you noticed that you had a knack for working with your hands, and was it sort of like a you had a strong bent toward being artistic in that way, or like building things? Like was that a natural aptitude that you had?
Well, it's a really good question because I've never considered myself academic or even
Hmm.
smart, you know, in the early days, you know. And one day I'm sitting with my wife Debbie and her kids, and we were sharing our academic history. And I said, "Oh yeah, I think I've got all my old stuff," and I pulled it all out and laid it out on the table, completely forgetting how bad I was at school because I was spending all my time either making surfboards or I wasn't. I don't think I ever did a night of homework in my life. I went to year 12. I didn't do any study for the exams, zero. I mean,
Hmm.
completely. You know, um, and I'm sharing the stuff, and they're looking at me, going, they're laughing. They're going, Nev, you got a F for math, a D for English. Oh, you got A with honours for art. Oh, that's
Hmm.
very good, you know, like, and I'm thinking, oh God, I must have been so stupid. But it wasn't that. I know I'm smart. I know I'm smart enough.
It sounds
But
like
I
you just
just wasn't
gravitated toward
academic.
what you were naturally interested in, right? Nothing
Exactly.
else could hold your attention.
Yeah, that's precisely the case. It was like I'm following my passion. I knew what my passion was, but I didn't know, you know, I've actually never had to look for a job. I've never had an employment. I've never been to somebody to ask for employment because I've always been in control of my own destiny, which can be a negative because you don't understand what it's like to have to go through a process to become recognized to get a position. I
Right.
always did that right from a very early stage.
So you're making surfboards in your dad's garage, and
Yeah.
your friends start to pay attention, and they start saying you have a thing, right? So you
Mm,
start surfing, you have a thing, and then you start making surfboards because you're artistic and are good with your hands.
mm.
And did you start out with the intention of doing anything other than making boards for yourself and your buddies? Or did you have sort of an aspirational goal to say, like, I'm going to sell these and make a living doing that?
Yeah. You know, there was a magazine called Tracks that started in 1970, so it'd only been going a year or two when I started, and it's the quintessential hippie surfing magazine back in the day. And I could see in that in the early days that there's nothing's going to happen in Perth, Western Australia. And so even when I was making boards in my dad's garage before it was truly commercial, I was beginning to realise that if I want to make a career out of this, and I wasn't really thinking I'm going to make a career out of this, but you know, subconsciously I'm going, I got to get out of here. So,
Hmm.
but in the meantime, the road ahead was um, finish school, and but while I'm here, I might as well sell some surfboards because people were interested. So, I literally had a business at school, and the deputy headmaster allowed me to put up posters around the school to sell my surfboards, and it was like, wow, you know, maybe I didn't realize at the time, but that was pretty remarkable. That that I actually had a business. And literally the day we finished year 12, I was 16, just about to turn 17, and my buddy Phil had just turned 17. We just got our licenses, and the Saturday morning after the Friday afternoon, where we had finished our last day at school, we opened Odyssey Surfboards in Perth, and away we go. My life in commercial business started, and in 1975 at 16 years old.
What a trip. And you did that with some people that had more of the business side of it? Did they
No,
kind of complement your... No?
zero. It was Phil and I and this other guy, and we took over an existing surfboard factory that the guys had enough, and it was called Tsunami Surfboards, like and we came up with I came up with the brand Odyssey. I drew the original logos, so I did have that artistic bent to be able to do those things. But from a business point of view, no idea. But there we were, and even my mum and dad had a business, but they didn't really. It's an interesting time back in the 70s, and maybe this is an overtly generalised comment, but there wasn't a lot of involvement from parents to kids. Like, I don't think my dad ever went to a school function when I was at school. There was never any discussion, so there wasn't like, oh, sit me down, this is what you do to be in business. To have that mentoring at such a young age may have been really good. But in many ways, I'm glad I didn't, because I was able to, we found it out ourselves. How do we pay a bill? Do we put money away? We just sold a surfboard. We got a profit. Oh, geez, what do we do with that? It was that fundamental. It's amazing.
And so walk me through how you decided to go from Perth to Queensland. It sounds like, that's across the whole continent of Australia, right? One side to the other.
Yeah.
And so that business, did you sell it to be able to move? How did you get out of there?
That's a great question, because it opens up a Pandora's box of life in business. So the dream, the excitement of setting something up, fantastic. Getting customers, people wanting your product, fantastic. Moving through that process, then, what are we going to do now? Hey, let's set up a shop. So we, it wouldn't have been less than 12 months after starting the business, we set up a shop in the heart of the city in Perth. And within about a month, I realised, oh my God, what have I done? What have we done? Because we had no customers. No one was coming into the shop. and it was, there's a lot of, our best customers were people that happened to be coming through from the US, and one of those guys became my best friend, who I ended up a few years later travelling across the Nullarbor Plains, which is one of the largest deserts in the world between two capital cities, so there's always a silver lining. There's always something positive from the negative. There was a fantastic podcast just recently I heard, and it was just this guy talking about, whatever bad happens, it sounds cliche, and we all know this, something good will come from that. Just wait for that good thing to evolve from that bad thing. And that's not being fatalistic. It's not spiritual. I'm just saying, just wait. Something good will come from that. And setting up a retail store was the dumbest thing that Phil and I could have done. But from that, we learned some lessons. One of them is I distinctly recall the trauma of thinking, I'm going to go down. This is going to break me. At 17, I'm sitting on the floor.
Life is over.
Life is over. Sure. I'm sitting on the floor of the change room, where we thought people were going to come in and buy an Odyssey T-shirt, or something. And I'm sitting there going, it's over. I'm done. Crying on the floor of the change room, and then going, I can't do this anymore. I'm okay, Phil, my buddy. I know we got problems, but it's all yours, mate. I'm going to walk away. I'm not running away. I'm going to walk away.
I'm out.
Okay. Do you want? And he went, yeah, sure. Just briefly, Phil, my buddy, at 14, turning 15, got his girlfriend pregnant. So, I went through that with him, and that whole tumultuous drama of the father of the girl freaking out and all this sort of stuff going down, and the baby being not been able to, the mother had to be the sister, and the mother's mother, the grandma had to be the mother. Oh my God, it was the 70s, right? And I went through all of that with Phil already. So we'd already experienced a lot of things. And there I am. And this is after us having to have to buy out our other partner for $3,000. So I hadn't even turned 18, and I'm going through all this stuff. And Phil said, "Yep, I'm into it. Let's do, no worries, Nev, And it wasn't like he was doing me a favor. It was like, it was a benefit for him because he then owned the business, and he could see. And Phil is the most amazing. He's an incredibly successful guy in aged care now. Do you know what his aged care company's called?
No.
Odyssey.
He borrowed the name from before. Amazing.
Yeah. So he set up these like incredible 5-star aged care homes, and he looked after my mother at Odyssey. I mean, it's almost a story that you couldn't make up. We
Wow.
started Odyssey together in my dad's garage. My mum loved Phil, vice versa. And then X amount of years later, I don't even want to guess, 60 years later, or 50 years later, my mum is spending her last 14 months of her life in Odyssey private aged care, using
What a
almost the
trip.
same logo. Yeah, it is. It's a total trip.
Oh, that's
It's,
amazing. So
yeah,
he took over the business and you bailed to go to Queensland.
correct. So what I did was my buddy, Larry Vigil, and his girlfriend jumped in my Jeep 4-wheel drive in June 1977, and I packed up everything that I owned, and we owned, and surfboards on the roof, and took off across the Nullarbor Plain, and we surfed our way all around the coast of Australia up to Sydney. I left them in Sydney. Now, I was heading to Nirvana. Now, Nirvana for me was Burleigh Heads. Now, Burleigh Heads is a tropical headland on the Gold Coast of Queensland. And the coast of Australia is made up of rivers, headlands, beaches,
Hmm.
a headland, and another river. All the way from Sydney right up. And as you get up to Queensland, where I live, they become more and more pristine. You got these incredible headland that goes way out, and there's beautiful rivers, and then waves peel around the northern tip of those points. Burleigh Heads is one of the most classic waves in the world. And I came to Queensland with my brother. So here's another little example of what life was like back in the 70s. My mum and dad allowed my brother and I was 13 or 14, and my brother was 17, and they encouraged us. We jumped on a Pioneer bus and drove around Australia for 3 weeks. And, back then there was no communication. I mean, you were lucky to pick up the phone. So we disappeared for 3 or 4 weeks traveling around the country and I was only 14. So, we've got this really free and easy lifestyle, and I had driven across the Nullarbor a couple of times, but in 1974, my brother and I on that trip, we went to the Gold Coast, and we went to Burleigh Heads, and I paddled out at Burleigh Heads at 14 and looked up at the headland and went, I'm coming back here. I loved it. This place is incredible. Now, I'm a natural foot surfer. It means my chest faces the wave when I'm going right. In Western Australia, most of the waves are lefts. The waves break more left than they do break right. So I had my back to the wave. So
Hmm.
Burleigh Heads is this perfect barrel, perfect tube, and that's the ultimate dream of a surfer, is to find a wave that's got a good tube. I mean, it sounds corny, hey dude, all that sort of
Hmm.
cliches about
Hmm.
surf speak, but it's true.
Yeah.
I was looking for
Yeah.
that wave, and so my nirvana was Burleigh Heads, and to this day, it's still my nirvana. I live 10 minutes down the road. My wife and I, Debbie, we walk around the point. There's koalas up in the trees. You walk around the point, there's birds, and you can see the waves peeling around the point. You look up and you can see the Surfers Paradise skyline. I highly recommend people to Google Burleigh Heads and have a look at what I'm talking about. You'll understand. So that was the reason to leave. The trip was amazing, but I was leaving everything behind and starting again. I knew I was going to go to Queensland to make surfboards. That was the goal. And somehow I wanted to meet my heroes. Now, we all have heroes in life. We have people we aspire to meet one day. And through that Tracks magazine and Surfing Life magazine, surfer shapers, surfboard manufacturers that also were good surfers, like Richard Harvey, um, um, Bob McTavish, Dick Van Stralen. People, you people out there wouldn't know who these people are, but in my bubble, in my tribe, these guys were gods of my industry as well as surfers. There were pro surfers that were amazing, like Sean Thompson and Ian Cairns and all these amazing surfers back in the day. But Richard Harvey, Bob McTavish, Dick Van Stralen, these guys were surfers, they were shapers of surfboards. And that's what I wanted to be. That's what I was. And all I wanted to do was meet these guys. So I get to Queensland. I'm driving up I'm not even at Queensland. You have Queensland and New South Wales, and the border of these two states of Australia is right. It's only 15 minutes down the road. Now, south of the border is Byron Bay, which you've all heard of, where all the movie stars live and everything. It's a beautiful, incredible space. Bob McTavish lived there. So I pull into this old garage that, has been there forever. And this is, I'm saying this is now 1977. Do you know where Bob McTavish lives? Oh, yeah, mate. Yeah, just around the corner, bud. So I drive around the corner and there's this farm. And I drive into the entrance of the farm. I'm shaking with nervousness. I'm about to meet my God, right? And I'm not kidding. Like, I'm 8. I hadn't even turned 18. I was still 17. Or maybe I was just turned 18. I can't remember. Anyway, there he is outside, wet rubbing the bottom of the surfboard. I couldn't believe it. And so, hi, Bob. My name's Neville. I was still Neville at that point. And I showed him my boards. He said, wow, so you do everything? You shape and you glass and you sand and you do pin lines and wow, that's great. Then he said, go up to Queensland, because that's where I was heading. Go and see Richard Harvey. Oh my God, Richard Harvey, yeah. Gave me his address, went and saw Richard. And then from that moment, from meeting these guys who are now my good friends, Bob's in his early 80s, Richard's mid 70s, and these guys became my good friends, but they set me on my path. They gave me the shoe-in that I needed to start making surfboards here on the Gold Coast. The Gold Coast is regarded as central station of surfboard, surfing from a professional surfer's point of view and surfboard manufacturing, because we have the most incredible waves and there's been a lot of professional surfing contests here, but everybody comes here to train. So that's why it's been a great place for me to come and set up my businesses.
Well, and so how did you actually open up your first factory? I guess you said high school. So did you finish high school before you went to Queensland, or did you do more schooling and then open up your first
Oh no,
factory
no,
there?
I finished high school at 16, so my birthday's late, isn't in November. So I'd finished school, and then started. There was an existing surfboard factory that Phil and I had noticed, called Tsunami Surfboards, and then we negotiated with them prior to us finishing school, and on that following Saturday we moved in because we had the time,
Got it.
because we finished our last exams. So yeah, that's how I got into the surfboard business in Western Australia. But the interesting story of starting again, as crazy as that sounds, in Queensland, was that I literally drove up the coast and parked in this street called Woodruff Avenue at the northern end of the Gold Coast.
Is this to
And
go see Richard?
I'd already seen Richard, and I was so
Okay.
excited because I'd met him. This is all on the same day. It blows my mind when I think about it. So in the morning, I meet Bob McTavish. By lunchtime, because it's only an hour and a half's drive from Byron Bay, I've met Richard Harvey. Then I went up to Surfers Paradise. I'd seen Burleigh Heads again, so I'd driven past Burleigh Heads to then go and see Richard and Dick Van Stralen. And then I kept driving to the northern end of the Gold Coast where Surfers Paradise is. Now, Surfers Paradise is a little bit like Miami in Florida. It's got buildings on the beach. And so I went up there. I parked, and then these guys come around my car, around my Jeep, and I started chatting with them, and they were all the best surfers in that area that were just checking the surf at the same time. I showed them my boards, and there was a girl there. Her name was Bridget. And on that same day, I get orders for surfboards. I meet my heroes, have a good look at where I'm going to be living, get orders, I think 1 or 2 orders for surfboards, and I meet my girlfriend for the first time.
Sounds like a movie. Keep going.
Seriously, it's ridiculous. Now, you asked me, how did I set up my first surfboard factory in, let's say, now it's for Queensland. It was in my girlfriend's, I'm not making this up, it was in my girlfriend's horse shed. So she lived on a farm out the back, and a beautiful house with a swimming pool out the back. But she loved her horses, and she had a horse shed, and I said, could I use your shed to actually make boards in? And I've got a photograph of me like stroking her horse, and I used to have this crazy curly blonde red mop of hair. I had natty dreadlocks before they were cool, right? So
Yeah.
and I'm stroking this horse, and there's a movie called Morning of the Earth, the famous surfing movie, Morning of the Earth. It's the most hip movie you'll ever see about what the life of a surfer was like in the early 70s. And all of the surfers, like Bob McTavish and Richard Harvey, they all featured in this movie. So there it was. I'm living the Morning of the Earth on the Gold Coast. Phil and I used to sit in a caravan outside of my mum and dad's house, at 15, waiting for this guy to come and pick us up to take us for a surf after school, an hour and a half drive to get to the beach to go for a surf. And we used to sit and listen to Morning of the Earth, the soundtrack. Every afternoon he was coming to pick us up, and I still see us sitting there listening to this to psych ourselves up to go for a surf.
Huh. What a trip. So you had your girlfriend, you set up your first factory in her horse shed,
Yeah.
and that led over time to more orders, and then you starting to travel the world as a surfboard shaper and surfer, correct?
Yeah. Well, the really interesting thing was that the Gold Coast had a contest every year called the Stubbies surfing event. It started in 1977, the year that I arrived on the Gold Coast. Now, that meant that the world's best surfers that I dreamed of one day even seeing, let alone speaking to, started rocking up at Burleigh Heads. And I would, from 78, 79, I used to go to the contest, hang out, try and meet the pro surfers. And over time, and then I started traveling, Hawaii, all California, all the Europe, France, Spain, Portugal, Morocco. I traveled the world from 78 to about 1980. And I started meeting these pro surfers. I'd go to surfing contests. I've told my 3 children, one of the lessons in life is to keep your radar on. Put yourself out there. You never know what's going to happen, and keep your radar on. Now, kind of what I mean by that is that some people's DNA sets them in a path where they might go out. I'm a little bit off track here, but I want to make this point because I think it's really important. You might go out to dinner, right, and your partner might sit with you, and you're talking to people, and at the end of the thing, your partner might say, "Well, that was a great night, wasn't it? And they were lovely people, and it'd be great to see them again." And I would sit there and go, "They were lovely people, they were great, but did you hear what they said?" And I think there's something blah blah blah. Keep your radar on, because everyone is going to offer you something in life. I don't care who they are, and you may not even capitalize on that for another 10 years. But one day you're going to bump into that person, or there's going to be a thought that comes through your mind and go, that guy, or that girl, wow. So that's I tell my kids, keep your radar on.
Well, it sounds to me like the story that you were telling me about, traveling from the west to the east side of
Oh,
Australia, and then being able
yes.
to you kind of followed the bouncing ball all the way through to the girlfriend and the shaping and the factory and everything
I
else.
followed the bouncing ball. That's great. I love it. That's exactly what was going on, because there I was going to the contest. That this was the context of the contest, was that
hmm
I would just rock up to the contest and spot, Mark Richards through the crowd or Sean Thompson through the crowd going, oh my God, that's Rabbit Bartholomew. Oh my God, I was a full-on groupie. I was about as groupie as you could possibly imagine. And then because I was making surfboards for very good surfers on the Gold Coast, and because back in the early 80s, the big clothing companies, the Billabong, Quicksilver, Rip Curl companies, weren't as big as they became. Now, this is another very interesting point. The surfboard is the billboard for the pro surfer. So when a photo is taken, all you saw on that surfboard in the late 70s, early 80s is the logo of the surfboard manufacturer, Nev or Lightning Bolt or Rusty or any of these brands. As the big clothing companies came in and started taking control of the surf scene, they demanded years later to have their logo on the nose of the surfboard and the surfboard logo to be smaller and down further, which was a travesty. But that's basically what happened. So, but in those early days, in the late 70s, early 80s, especially around about 1979, 1980, the Nev brand, the NEV, was on the nose of all these surfboards at Burleigh Heads, and all the pro surfers were surfing the same day. They'd be paddling along and they'd see these Nevs everywhere. And then all of a sudden, these pro surfers were coming to me. It was like, oh my God, they want me to make a surfboard for them. So I almost short-circuited the journey of the years that it would have taken me living on the Gold Coast, arriving on the Gold Coast, wet behind the ears, with not knowing anybody, to all of a sudden making surfboards for the world's best surfers. And there was a lot of jealousy, and I say this respectfully, there was a lot of jealousy on the Gold Coast from other surfboard manufacturers that had been here since surfing began on the Gold Coast, and they weren't making boards for these guys. It was a real
And
lesson.
so was it just luck? Was it just timing and luck of you putting the logo in a place and people seeing it and getting in with a couple of like big names?
There's no
What
luck.
was it that put you?
There's no luck in this. We could run those cliches all day, every day.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
is all about putting yourself out there. This is getting back to my point. You never know who you're going to meet. You never know what action that you take is going to turn into something good or bad. You just don't know before you do it. But do it anyway, right? So I'll give you one prime example. So I'd already made boards for all these local surfers. They were doing good. I had a bit of a presence of guys in the water. It still wasn't enough. There were other labels that were out there too, of course, other surfboard brands. But one day, and this was in 1981, I think, or 82, I go to the contest. I've made a board for a young surfer from Bali, of all places. His name was Ketut Menda. And he is now a legend in Bali. There's 4 or 5 surfers in Balinese that became the first professional surfers, and Ketut Menda was the first Indonesian. You've got to remember, surfing wasn't even there before 1974 or so, and less than 7 or 8 years later, we've got a professional surfer on the tour. So he rocks up, and I had met him already, and he asked me to make him a surfboard. I met him in Bali in 80. So this was 82, so I met him in Bali in 81. I make him this board, and I put my life into this board. I made it beautiful. I made it bright, because this guy, Ketut, was so dynamic in the way he surfed. And everybody loved him. So I made the board, and the grandstand was set up at the contest, and there's all these big, beautiful pine trees running up the point. So I got the board, and I laid it against the pine tree. And I then went and set up on the grandstand and just pretended that I was just watching, but I wasn't. I was watching all the pro surfers arriving and then walking up the point to check the surf out, and they all had to walk past the grandstand. So this was all strategic. So they're walking past, and I'm watching these guys walk past, ignore the board completely, and then all of a sudden, this guy, his name was Larry Bertelman. They used to call him the Rubber Man, and he was the most dynamic surfer ever, like the incredible Hawaiian surfer. He walks past, stops at the board, looks at it, picks it up, puts it under his arm. I almost wet myself. Larry Bertelman was touching my surfboard. I couldn't believe it. So he's holding the board, he's checking it out, and then he puts it down, and then walks away. And I didn't have the guts to jump down there and go, "Hey, my name's Nev," you know. And then about 10 minutes went by, and I went and stood next to the tree, and I'm looking out at the surf, and then I get this tap on my shoulder, and I go, "Oh," so I turn around, and there is Sean Thompson. Now, Google Sean Thompson. Anybody listening? He is a South African surfer that's the most beautiful guy on the planet. He's like the Brad Pitt of surfing, right? He's an academic. He's brilliant, the most incredible surfer, and he was like the Kelly Slater of this period. He goes, "Hey, Brew, did you make this board?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "Hey, man, hey, Brew, maybe you could make me a few surfboards." And I said, "Sure, man, yeah." And he gave, I wrote a few dimensions down for the board, had a bit of a chat with him. My heart's pounding inside, but I'm keeping myself together. Got a bit choked up then. It's a weird emotion when you think about impactful things that change your direction in life, And Sean and I are mates now, so we talk about this every now and again. So I hold myself together, and I had a combi back then, as everybody did. And I casually stroll back to the combi. Like, Katut hadn't come yet to pick up his board. He was actually out in the water. I didn't realise. So I pick up his board, walk back to my combi, sit in the combi, wind up the windows, start driving away, and then screamed at the top of my voice. Couldn't believe it that Sean Thompson had just asked me to make him some surfboards. And there's probably a million other analogies in other forms of life, but it's a life lesson. Keep you cool. Keep your radar on. Put yourself out there, and put yourself out there, and put yourself out there. Never stop putting yourself out there. Even at 65, I'm putting myself out there, and I don't know what the result's going to be. And that one moment turned into all the South African surfers, a bunch of Hawaiian surfers, a bunch of Californian surfers, all ordering my surfboards over the next 2 or 3 years. And it completely set me up for me to then be able to travel. There's another little prime example that we may not get to, so I'm going to say it now, is that from that moment, the following year, 1983, I'm making boards. Now I'm making boards for all these. They're all arriving. So they've sent me letters, no emails back then. And, "Nev, could you make me some boards?" Or they'd rock up, say, "Nev, the contest starts in 4 days. I need a board." "Yeah, sure, mate." And I'd make a board literally in a couple of days for them, or sometimes overnight. I'd stay up all night and make a surfboard. They would surf in the event. And other surfboard manufacturers wouldn't do that. That was the other thing. I didn't mind busting my gut. I got a letter from Sean saying, "Thank you so much, man, for making these boards, and it's so good to see somebody so committed, blah blah blah." And I've got that framed, Well, hopefully see you at Jeffreys Bay this year. And guess what? I went to Jeffreys Bay that year. I took up his invite, which wasn't a formal invite, but by July, that was in March of '82, and by July I was in Jeffreys Bay with Sean, surfing with him every day at one of the world's best waves in South Africa. So in early 1983, I get this Japanese guy comes to me. This is really important. So I know I'm rambling a little bit, but this one's important. This Japanese guy, and Japan was new in surfing too, and he said, "Oh, Mr. Nev, you make surfboard for Takao Kuga and Suji Kasia, please." And I said, "Oh, look, I don't really have time. I'm like, it's 5 days before the contest." And he kept badgering me. This guy, Kaneko Kazunori, kept badgering me. Okay, I'll make you these boards. And he said, "Mr. Nev, if Takao and Suji make main event," because there was a qualifying event and the main event, "if they make main event, you're very famous in Japan." I'm going, "Well, okay." So I made them their boards. Shuji Kasia almost made the main event, and Takao made the main event. And so that was March 1983. Within about 3 months, I was in Japan shaping surfboards. And for the next 5 years, I travelled back and forth to Japan, shaping between 100 and 300 surfboards at a time, and I was making a fortune. I was killing it. I would go to Japan, work 15 hours a day. I got to a point where I was shaping 15 surfboards a day, which is unheard of, and my fingertips used to bleed from the going back and forth over the boards. But I was earning really good money. Came home, bought a beachfront block of land. It set me up for life. That one moment of me making the decision to make surfboards for two unknown surfers and busting my gut to get those boards made for them whilst I was making boards for my heroes. Because I made it for those two Japanese surfers, it set me up for life. Because Japan became my cash cow. And I love the Japanese. I used to go and spend so much time there surfing and making surfboards, and some of my best friends, still to this day, my friends that I brought to Australia when I had my surf shops, and it's just most amazing experience.
So Nev, that's so amazing. You fell in love with Japan. I guess that competition, them being able to ride your boards, and you did that the board shaping 5 days before, and they ended up winning, and that's what propelled you into the Japanese market and traveling. What was it, back and forth from the Gold Coast?
I've been all over Japan 101 times. I've had the most amazing waves there. People don't think there's good surf in Japan, but and whether that's relevant to anybody, but there's incredible waves during the typhoon season where everybody gets wiped out. And that's the funny thing about surfers. It's embarrassing. We get really excited when a thing like a cyclone is heading towards a coast of anywhere in the world, and we're
Right.
oblivious to the damage. I mean, you'll see hurricanes hitting the east coast of the US, and people freaking out, and people dying, property being destroyed, and then the wind goes offshore, and then all the surfers go, "Whew!" It's like it's criminal, almost.
Because they know it's going to come on back.
For
Yeah.
sure. The waves are going to be pumping from a cyclone swell or a hurricane swell. So yeah, it's quite funny.
Well, I've lived on both coasts of the U.S. I live on the East Coast now, and I remember when some of the big storms have come up the coast, the hurricanes. Most people will evacuate. I'm here in
Yeah.
Charleston, South Carolina, as we're recording this, and I remember a few years ago we were here, and everybody that was what we considered bold would go out to the shoreline and just watch these monster, frothy waves coming. And this is not really a surf mecca, but people still surf
Yeah.
here. But I
Yeah.
remember just seeing these like diehards just paddle out into the chop and just
Yeah.
thinking they were insane because the clouds were purple and it was so scary looking with the wind blowing. But yeah, surfers
Oh,
are a different kind of human being for sure.
okay. So on that note, I just want to run a really quick little story. Last year, I went to Nova Scotia. Now, I'm up in Nova Scotia with a friend who's a surf photographer. I arrived at 11 p.m. and he's got a truck outside. And I walk out and there's surfboards poking out the back of the truck. It's February. And he goes, and I said, "Oh, so I knew we were going to go surfing, and I'd never surfed water that cold." And he goes, "No, we're going now." And I said, "What do you mean?" He goes, "We're going to go and surf the River Bore." So we drive an hour and a half inland to a river, and we get there at about 1:30 in the morning under the half moon, and I'm putting on a 6'4" wetsuit, booties, hood, gloves, the whole thing. I'm now
Yeah.
picking up this really heavy, big longboard, and I'm chasing my buddy, Yassine Olihal, through the marsh of about a kilometre, because there the tides are so big. When it's low tide, it's just marsh all the way. Finally get to the riverbank, and I'm running down the riverbank, face planting in the mud, tripping, falling, and then I see the giant chunks of ice up and down each side of the river. I'd never seen this before in
Wonderful.
my life. I'd never seen chunks of ice going, what's going on with that? We get in the water, then we paddled 3 kilometres up the river towards the river mouth, down the river towards the river mouth, and it took us forever to get there. We're finally standing on this low bank, and there's all farmhouses with the lights coming on, going, "What are these idiots doing?" At 2:00 in the morning. And then we
Right.
surfed the River Bore. Now, I just look back at that and go, that's just crazy. It was just the funnest moment, one of the funnest moments of my life. We're screaming with exhilaration, and no non-surfer, or even a lot of surfers, go, what's wrong with you guys? Are you tripping? Like, and then after falling off one of the waves, I'm paddling in this rapid as the water's rushing back up the river, and I'm looking up at the riverbank, and I'm thinking to myself, I wish the boys back home could see me now. Like, this is hilarious. I can't believe this. And then I'm looking up at this archaeological wall of mud and ice, and then I went, oh my God, and I paddled away as quickly as I could in the current, because I was realizing that ice is going to fall in any minute. And those are the things that we do, apart from,
Yeah.
you know,
Paddling out in the hurricanes, yes.
yeah,
Or
yeah,
typhoons or cyclones, yes.
yeah.
Wild. So you're traveling around the world. Japan is a big hit. You're going
Mm,
back and forth. How do we jump from that point in time to the place where you're sitting in the ocean, you're seeing the plastic on the beach, and you start to well, there's obviously this empire that you've built with Nev that I guess
mm,
goes far beyond just Japan. So let's not skip over the details of what, because
mm,
here's the thing. When I know about Nev, and I'm not from, I'm from Salt Lake City, Utah. I'm not from a place where there was a lot of surfing, but we
yeah,
would travel to Hawaii or to San Diego as a
yeah,
family. And, there were, Billabong and Rip
mm,
Curl and these other brands, but I remember Nev, right? I remember it
yeah,
vividly.
yeah,
And it's just so interesting to have that circle back to our relationship and have it be something you originated. um
mm,
so walk me through just the empire building stage. Obviously you went back to you bought some property with some of the money you made from going crazy with your shaping and
mm,
just bloody fingers and bloody knuckles doing that. What was it,
mm,
many hours a day? Tell me about the evolution of the business for
yeah,
Nev and the brand.
yeah. Well, everything's about brand. You can have all the skill in the world. Actually, everything is about brand and personality. And you can be the most talented person on the planet, but if you have zero personality, you're not going to get anywhere. Maybe you'll get somewhere in your room and you will achieve amazing things with your focus. But if you want to expand what you have into the marketplace, either you have to have it or somebody else has to have it. You have to have the brand. And the one thing that I realized very soon is that the evolution of my silly name, the boy named Sue, Neville,
Uh-huh.
Ginger, the evolution of my name was quite interesting. Okay, I've got to tell you something. Just think about my last name, Nev Hyman. I mean, it was a double whammy, like Nev Hyman. My nickname at school was Buster Hyman, of course. Forgive me for the connotations. Um, and then as I moved forward through life, my the first surfboard that I actually drew a logo and put it on the board, I called it Hyman Surfboards, because Bob
Uh-huh.
McTavish used his last name and Richard
Uh-huh.
Harvey
Why
uses
not
his
you?
last name. Why
Yeah.
not me? So the board's laying on the ground at a place called Left Handers in down south at Margaret River, Western Australia, and a bunch of guys walk past. I'm just about to wax up my new board that I just made, and the guys walk past, and one guy bursts out laughing and goes, "Hey mate, you better not break that one." And I just went, "Oh no, no, I can't call my surfboards Hyman
Can't
surfboards.
work. It's not going to work.
Not going to work." So then I created Odyssey surfboards, and that was all good because that was the period, seagulls,
Mm.
sun,
Mm.
etc. So when I got to Queensland, I had to start again. So I started writing Neville Hyman on the bottom of the surfboards with a repeatograph pen. So my first, and then I got a logo designed that was Neville Hyman surfboards, Gold Coast, and it was a fish design, which I'm remaking today, and people are really excited about it. But it was still Neville Hyman surfboards. And then I went, got to get rid of this Neville bit. So I called it Nev Hyman, NEV Hyman,
Mm-hmm.
and that was better. And then one day I'm sitting there going, just drop the Hyman, get rid of it.
And
So
just go with Nev.
just go with
Yeah.
Nev. Now, as that evolved, it became Nev, and then it became the big logo. And the '80s was the perfect time for me to do this.
Yeah.
If it was the
It was. It
2000s,
was. It's perfectly associated with that time. And
big,
yeah.
big hair, big color, big
Yeah.
everything. Whereas
Yeah.
if I had
Yeah.
started the surfboard company in 2000, it would have been a little black logo down the rail of the surfboard, because everything's got to be low key. You don't have a big logo on a board anymore. It's the hipsters don't like that. Now everybody wants big logos on their boards. It's quite funny that the evolution has changed.
It's
So, but
coming back. Yeah.
the thing about my name, this is another quick little funny story. You know how I was saying that in 1982 I was making boards for all these Hawaiian surfers and everyone. So I got invited to go to Hawaii by this guy by the name of Vince Klein to shape surfboards for town and country surfboards in Hawaii. And I think I was the first Australian to be paid by another surfboard company to fly to Hawaii and shape. I was so excited. So I started shaping surfboards there. And of course I was going surfing. So I had bought, this is what you do when you arrive in Hawaii when you've got no money. You go to the local secondhand car place, you buy a beat up old Cadillac. So I bought this beat up old Cadillac, chucked my boards on the roof with a couple of friends, drove to the North Shore of Hawaii, and then started surfing every day. And so I'm surfing Pipeline one day, badly, and I come in, and it's been raining, and my car's covered in mud. And the Hawaiian surfers that I had been making surfboards for back in months before, so it was only months before, they saw my car, or they might have seen me in the water and seen my car there. So and Hawaiians don't say Nev, they say, "Hey brother, hey never, never, you go surf, brother." And I'm going, oh, so I get to my car, they've graffitied with their fingertips, which I've got a photograph of, on the side of my car, "Never mind, Buster,"
Yeah.
and never say never with an A, not an ER. So I actually had, and I used that on myself. I went, "Oh my God, that's fantastic," and I started putting logos on my boards: "Never look back, never say never, never mind." And so I had "Never mind" before Nirvana. I had "Never say never" before James Bond and Justin Bieber. I actually was using those commercially before those people were using it. And I'm still using it
You,
today. I still have it on my surfboards. I have Nevermind. I love Nevermind.
you need royalties off those for the
I
Nirvana
know.
and the Justin Biebers.
I'm coming for you guys. I'm coming. Hear this? I'm coming for you. Oh my God. So yeah. So the whole the Nev brand changed to Nev, and then I think I was the last well-known surfboard company not to go into apparel. The last guy to really successfully go from a surfboard manufacturer, the guys behind Rip Curl, they were surfboard manufacturers before it became Rip Curl. Quicksilver, same sort of situation. Then Rusty Surfboards Rusty Preisendorfer became the clothing company, Rusty, R. Dot. But the point being is that I missed the boat. I didn't start a clothing company. I had the opportunity in the early 90s because my brand was really building fast. I was the biggest surfboard manufacturer in the Southern Hemisphere. My brand was all over the world. I had the world's best surfers riding my boards. By 1998, I had everybody. I had probably one of the best surf teams from Kelly Slater through to Munga Barry, to Danny Wills, to everybody was riding my boards, and I was making 150 boards a week, and my little empire was growing. So my brand was growing so quickly that I could turn it into a clothing brand, and I actually got to the point in 1995, 96 to a big clothing company in Melbourne, Australia, decided to license my brand. So we went to The Hague in the Netherlands and met with a company called MEX, MEXX, a huge clothing company. And they didn't know, they knew that I was a surfer and I had a surfboard with me to show them, and had done all these things, and this could be a great opportunity for you, blah, blah, blah. And the guy, the head of marketing, he took one look at it and went, He didn't know my name was Nev. He just went, Nev. Okay, good. Yes, this is a good brand. Very powerful, very strong, 3 letters, very balanced. Yes, this is good brand for clothing. And I went, yeah, thank you. My name's Nev. Oh, because I would travel the world shaping surfboards and being at contests, and people would come up and go, I didn't know that Nev was a person. I thought it was like an acronym for something.
I did too. Funny
Yeah,
enough, yeah.
yeah, I know. And that's so. I guess what I'm saying is, it's all about brand. You can't underestimate the power of no matter how good you are at making the product, you've got to put that amount of energy into building the persona, building the brand, building the person behind it. The benefit that I've had is that I do have, I guess you could say, a vivacious personality. Some people would go, he's an idiot. Oh my God, get him out of my face. He sucks the air out of the room. I don't know. But the other side of that is that I like people. I love talking to people. I could be so down and then go down the road to go and fill my truck up with petrol and be in the shop making somebody laugh or cracking a joke that, just for the fun of it.
What a trip. So So the Nev brand to the switch to apparel. So
Yeah,
this company Mex in the Netherlands, right?
yeah.
So they felt great about your brand and they started to put it on all sorts of apparel. I guess that's
Yes
the
and no.
that's the
So,
way the
so
story.
yeah. This is the thing. No one has a crystal ball, and we had high hopes. And the company that I was working with, we set up in Torquay in Victoria, where Rip Curl are based. We set up a little warehouse and we started making samples and everything. And turns out that the guy that I had signed a contract with was a bit of a, and this has happened a few times in my life. Had been doing some illegal things with valuations of properties in Australia, and it hit the press whilst this was all happening. And then a few days later, I get a call from my Japanese surfboard manufacturer. This is unbelievable. And now, when you make surfboards in Japan, everything's got to be so cool. You can't compromise your brand, or your brand will only last about 2 years. And I was making hardcore surfboards and a very limited range of T-shirts and things like that to be sold in these little boutique surf shops all over Japan. They call me and say, Nev, you must come to Japan. Why? Nev clothing everywhere. I'm going, what? What are you talking about? So I flew to Japan, walked down the
Mm,
main street in Osaka, in the big boulevard there, and about every 10 shops, my Japanese surfboard manufacturer walked me into the shop, and there was racks and racks and racks of Nev clothing. And I'm just going, what's going on? It turns out this guy in Victoria had sold the license to manufacture Nev clothing to an agent in Japan, which he didn't have the right to do, which I was getting nothing from. So I sacked him, then started negotiations with the company that had inadvertently bought my brand. Now,
right.
this is where I'm saying, you know how I said before, a negative can become a super positive. So
Huh.
at the time, my Japanese surfboard distributors are saying, Nev brand finish, Japan, no more. Sorry. They were gutted. They'd built their careers on my brand in Japan over the previous few years, 5 years, 7 years. In the meantime, from the money that I was making from Japan, I was coming back and forth to Australia, and I was, making good money. And we had a dual tax situation between Japan and Australia, so I was bringing in tax free. I ended up buying a beachfront block of land and built a beachfront house. It was my dream. I mean, I couldn't even believe what had happened. And then, by 1988, I had a beachfront house because of Japan and my other things. So then, 6 or 7 years later, business is great, making tons of money. I've got my brands going around the world. Things are going really well. And all of a sudden, and where I was making my most profitable place was Japan, even still, because I was exporting surfboards to Japan by then. And then I'm going, oh my God, this is going to kill me. I've got this huge mortgage at 17% interest. And this was, so I'm going, oh my God. So I fly to Japan, and because of my contacts in Japan, I have this great relationship with a trademark attorney. And he goes, okay, we've negotiated with the people doing the clothing. And so I flew to Japan with my wife at the time, and we then began negotiations. We couldn't stop them from making the clothing because it would have taken 2 years, and that's all we wanted to do, stop them. But the lining on this was that I had a guy in Japan who was, you could say, good corporate Yakuza, if there is such a thing. He
Hmm.
was so well respected in the clothing industry. His name was Mr. Nylon, made his fortune from selling blue jeans on the streets of Tokyo. Incredible guy, a surfer. I was making him surfboards, all the time. He comes to this meeting, and it turns out, cut a long story short, he negotiated with the owner of this company to do a compensation payout and to join with us in making Nev clothing in Japan. Paid off all of our debt, and all of a sudden, I've got an income, a royalty stream from clothing in Japan. The company's still going. It's been almost down to zero. It's been way up there, but for 24 years later, or whatever it is, it's still going. And that's almost unheard of in Japan, that a clothing company like that, it's not sold to surfers, it's sold to non-surfers, people who want a piece of what the life that I have and others
Hmm.
around me have. So
Hmm.
You cannot. Such an incredible positive came out of such a terrible thing to have happened at that time for my company.
So how does this transition into you sitting in the ocean on a surfboard waiting for your
Yeah,
waves and seeing plastic in the ocean or
yeah.
on the beaches? How does
Well,
that start?
that was 1992 roughly, and at the time, my daughter Renee, she was the Australian champion, incredible surfer, and I was taking her around the world to all these tropical islands for promotional surf shoots, to get photos of her surfing and video. And I'm walking on this island off the coast of a little island off the coast of New Caledonia, and I see all this plastic. Now, my business had grown to the point where I could afford to do all these things, and it was really exciting. And it's sowed a seed then about what's going on here with all this plastic. 10 years later, I've gone through a divorce and things, and I see this company that I get approached to invest in this company to recycle plastic. So in the meantime, the world has found out about the Pacific gyres and plastic in the ocean. Even by 2004, there was still very little understanding of what was going on with the environment. But I invested in this plastics recycling company because I was doing pretty good, and I thought I could at least do something. That's my little piece of the puzzle that I could help. Everybody's got to do a little bit. So I foolishly spent a ton of money investing in this company. Whilst my company, my surfboard company, was still doing quite well. There's a whole bunch of stuff behind that, but that's the journey between the company actually achieving goals, seeing the plastic in the environment, and then going off on a bit of a tangent many years later, investing in a plastics recycling company.
So help me bring the dots together for me from the investing in the recycling company to,
Yeah,
I suppose, the bit that I know about, building things with plastic. Help our listeners understand what the vision was and what it kind of transformed into over time.
sure. So when I invested in this plastics recycling company, it was a company based in Belgium that took the 7 codes of plastic. And if anybody knows what I mean by that, there's 3 or 4 or 5 codes, three or 4 codes that are everyday plastics. And then the code number 7 is a mixture of all forms of plastic. So the 7 codes of plastic aren't necessarily recyclable. When people talk about recycling, a plastic bottle, they can turn it into another plastic bottle, but it has to be pure bottle into pure bottle. It's got to be, if you extrude something, if you get a milk bottle and grind that down and make it into another product, it has to be a pure polymer. So no one really knew much about that back in the day. I saw this opportunity to recycle plastic because of what I'd seen years before, but there was still, as I said, no talk about what was happening in the Pacific. Global warming wasn't really on everybody's lips. So I became a passive investor. As I said, I'd been through a divorce and I was sort of kind of rebuilding, and I was rebuilding my company too. I was because I had taken my focus off the business in around about 2001, 2002. I had spent the previous years, many years, developing a computer shaping system for making surfboards. So that's another topic that we can discuss a little bit further down the track. But I had my brand. I was making 100, 120, 150 surfboards a week, which is a lot in our industry. I'd helped to develop computer shaping. Surfboards are made by hand. Surfboard shaping, all the shaping that I did of surfboards in Japan was done with an electric planer, a surf form, which is like a rasp, blocks, and you literally hand-shaped surfboards. But that meant I had to shape every single surfboard. And if I did 15 surfboards in a day, yes, I'm making very good money. Very few surfboard shapers on the planet could do that. But my fingertips would bleed and I'd be almost dead by the end of the day.
Hmm.
And demand was outstripping my ability to be able to keep up with that demand. So that's why I went down the road of trying to mechanize the process of making surfboards. So all of that happened in the mid to late 90s, early 2000s. Took my focus off the brand of Nev because of all the turmoil that I was going through personally. I had young children, the whole thing. Then I come out the other side of that. I've got a little bit of cash and I invest in this, a little bit of too much cash, and I invest in this plastics recycling because I want to do some good. Again, passive investor. I'm rebuilding my brand. I've taken on investors, and I start building this NEV surfboard brand again, using computer technology and getting it out there into the media, into the marketplace. And I'm sitting on this plastics recycling investment and not doing anything with it. About 4 years later, in about 2009, the gentleman that I invested in got cancer and was dying. And there were a bunch of shareholders that all live in the same area, live around this golf course here, and they all started freaking out. And at the time, I was making really good royalties from the clothing from Japan. So I said to my wife, we should buy out these shareholders and take over the plastics recycling company and own that. Because there was a couple of opportunities that I'd been working on with the rest of the team, and they were real opportunities to turn that investment into a facility to make products like shipping panels, like Trek type products, the company Trek in the US, that type of product. And there was a very strong likelihood of us closing a deal. I was back and forth to Papua New Guinea, flying around the world, doing all this sort of stuff to get this company off the ground. And so we took a great risk. My wife and I took a great risk in buying out all these shareholders to protect my interests in the original investment and to take an opportunity that was right there, right under our nose. And we also had the income coming from Japan to make it happen. So all that happened. And then the company in Japan, one of the companies they were selling NEV clothing to, one of the large department stores, went broke. And the company in Japan then went into receivership. So my income stream dried up, and I just embarked on this big expansion program with NEV surfboards, as well as trying to close a deal with the plastics recycling situation. So this is another lesson in life again, what I started this whole podcast on, about people accusing me of being too spread. Now, yeah, to a point, I should have just focused on surfboards, but I had an investment over here that I had to deal with. So I had to focus on something else that was completely outside of my pay scale, completely outside of my ability to understand. But I dug deep and started learning more and more about recycling, and I started traveling and things like that. So, yeah, how that evolved is that I was in control of the plastics recycling company, and I had this other company that I'd started called Firewire Surfboards. So I started that company with a guy by the name of Bert Berger. I'm not making that up. That's his name. It's almost as bad as Nev Hyman. And Bert had this amazing technology, a new way of making surfboards. Because surfboards have been made the same way. Just really briefly, a surfboard is the core of a surfboard is made from a surfboard blank, polyurethane foam, and down the middle of that blank is a strip of wood called a stringer. And that gives the board structural integrity when you're riding a wave, so it won't break in half, and flexural properties and all these sorts of things. And they can only be hand-shaped. But because I was working on this new technology for computer shaping, we had this opportunity to grow the business with that. And Bert had this new technology on how to fiberglass, how to coat a surfboard. So I took that on board with Bert under the brand Nev, and we developed that in 2005, and we made 20 surfboards that were called Nev, and we gave them to test to the world's best surfers, from Kelly Slater to Taj Burrow to Mick Fanning, to all of them. And the feedback was out of control. The feedback was off the charts. We did a trade show in January 2006 with all the new technology and the surf industry, the Channel Islands and the Rusty Priesendorfers and the Matt Biolases and things. They all came and saw my these boards, and they couldn't believe it. They were shocked at how strong, light they were. And we knew we were on something. And when we came home, at the original owners of Billabong, the general manager and the CEO of Billabong had already invested in Nev with this new technology in 2004. And after the trade show, the success of the trade show with this new technology, they said, Nev, this is fantastic. We're going to drop everything else, but we're going to keep the technology of the surfboards, but we can't call it Nev because it's an older brand.
Mm-hmm.
This is another lesson in life with, I could be the classic founder and say, there's no way that we're changing the brand. How dare you suggest that? Get hurt, get offended. And it took me less than 10 minutes of sitting with Dougal Walker, the ex-general manager of Billabong, to tell him, I agree. We'll drop Nev and we'll come up with a new brand. And even this is a funny story, because then we spent the next 3 months, because what was happening is we were making boards for all pro surfers, and people like Taj Burrow and others, they were winning contests on the boards. First time ever on new technology. So that was actually after. So just before that, there was the excitement about the brand. These experts in brand from Billabong said, we can't use Nev. So they said, we went to PR agents, we went to everybody, branding people, couldn't come up with a brand. And one day, Mark Price, who used to be the CEO of Reef Brazil, of Gotcha in the US, brilliant CEO and branding expert. He walks in with a Firewire cable from Apple. And he goes, guys, we're going to call it Firewire. And we went, what? Shut up. What are you talking about? And then things have got to grow on you. Things do grow on you. You can have a gut feeling about something and you could be right that that's not going to work.
Yep. Yep.
But he said, look, no, stop, hang on, no, hear me out here. Firewire. It's balanced. Fire. Wire. Hang on. So we did. And we embarked on that. And about 3 months into it, after we've got brands on board, we've got Taj Burrow out there surfing the boards with the new Firewire brand, we get a cease and desist from Apple. Like, uh-oh. We then embarked on litigation to defend our position. And the end result was that Apple agreed that they weren't going to commercialize the term Firewire. They weren't going to start making clothing or sunglasses or surfboards with the brand Firewire. If it was something, we wouldn't have had a shot at it. But
Right.
and they said, "Nah, go ahead, guys, it's all good." So, so that's where Firewire came from. And so there I was doing Firewire, doing Julian Environmental Technology, JET. That was the name of the plastics recycling company that I'd invested in. And I was spread too thin. And this is where my detractors were correct. I couldn't do both. So I started losing my position in Firewire. And I really didn't want to be that traveling surfboard shape designer like my competitors were anymore. I'd been doing it for the last 20, 30 years, going to all the contests. It sounds glamorous and it sounds great, and it is, but I just didn't really want to do that anymore. I was really focused on the environment, on doing something good. And I was very focused on getting my wife and I's investment back. So in 2012, my focus drifted towards the plastics recycling thing. And then that becomes a whole new story.
We're going to have to make sure we leave time to talk about surf lakes at some point at the end if we can.
Oh, yeah.
Because I think that's an interesting little hook at the end. But yeah, I really want to, I'll just be clear. The main thing that brought us together was my personal interest and fascination with supporting companies that were doing something that I felt was worthy of my time and attention to help them build their team, right? So
Sure. Yeah.
your interest in this recycling concept, is taking plastics and turning it into usable materials, is what brought us together, and
Correct.
really the main thrust of bringing you on this podcast too. So it's so fascinating that your connection to the ocean, to nature, this artistic bent that you have, and this incredible life that you were able to travel the world and do this amazing work with shaping surfboards and helping the sport expand around the world and getting into apparel, and then being able to say, well, I want to use my money for good, and then deciding to buy out the shareholders of this recycling company. Help me understand the journey, because we met when you were on sort of like a fundraising tour, if I'm not mistaken. I remember learning about what you were doing. It was so inspiring to me. I'd emailed, I think somebody had introduced us. I think that you'd spoken at an event, I think, and you were doing like a US tour. and they put
Yeah,
us together, and you happened to be coming to the Bay Area, and we just kind of
yeah,
connected. And you were like, weren't you on a fundraising tour at that point?
yeah, exactly. And the interesting thing about that point is that I had, um, okay, so I used my own capital to invest in the original company, and
Yeah.
then I had to extend myself to own the company. Then we got deals almost over the line, contracts signed with a listed company in Papua New Guinea that came to the Gold Coast, signed all the contracts. It was a $15 million deal. And at that point in time, I thought, deal done, great. I can go back and focus on the surfboards. The deal fell over, as it does. So that's the other part of the crystal ball. I didn't know that was going to fall over, but it did. And that was in 2011. By 2015, my focus was so off track that I eventually backed out of Firewire surfboards, and Kelly Slater, the 11 times world surfing champion, bought out the existing shareholders, most of the existing shareholders, and owns that company, which is a legacy for me that I'm very proud of. But it kind of triggered me to kind of step out of the surf industry. Not completely, but gave me time to think about what I'm doing with Nev House. So, not Nev, with Jet at the time, and then Jet became Nev House. So in 2011-12, I was traveling the world, probably more towards 12, 13, and I began going to landfills. As crazy as this sounds, like, because I've spent a lot of time in Bali, in Indonesia, surfing, and there's a landfill called the Surawong landfill just outside of Kuta Beach. Now, anybody who goes to Bali, when you fly in towards the airport, you fly over the landfill. It's the biggest, ugliest, most disgusting landfill you've ever seen in your life, and it's built on a mangrove. Now, in 2012, I met with the Pastika government in Bali. I went to Jakarta and was invited to speak to Governor Jokowi, who's now the president of Indonesia. At the time, he was the governor. I didn't get a chance to speak to him because I missed his meeting. Can you believe it? Can you believe I actually missed his meeting? We were in Jakarta, and we left at 9 a.m. for an 11 o'clock meeting, and it was only 15 minutes away. But the streets were absolutely jam-packed with people because Megawati's husband had died, and all the streets closed. They put
Oh,
flowers
wow.
all over the streets and everything. So I got there late, and we missed it. But I was then invited to speak, first Westerner to speak on stage in the governor's hall in Jakarta to 120 of the. Cut a long story short, the Nev House, or what I was trying to do with Nev House, taking plastic out of the environment and turning it into housing for the poor, was on the front page of Governor Jokowi's newspaper with a 20 million people readership. And the story was, Nev has, I'm not making it sounds funny, but Nev has come to Indonesia to clean up the environment. And I went, oh my God, no, I haven't come to clean up the environment. That's a little bit bigger than me, you know.
Yeah.
Um, anyway, so I spent time on landfills, places where you can't even breathe, talking to the pickers, standing in the rubbish, and it's so potent that I was scared to lick my lips. These people, these children, these parents, they're digging through the rubbish and everything, and I'm scared to lick my lips, thinking I was going to get sick. You know, it's unbelievable. I went to this recycling centre, and there was generations of people, like maybe three generations. So young 16-year-old girls with babies in their arms. The 16-year-old girls had never been more than 3 to 4 kilometres away from that recycling centre, which backed onto the landfill, in their lives.
Hmm.
They live and breathe this life, and it struck me. It just rocked me. I thought, can we somehow deal with this plastic? I was only thinking about plastic at the time. So I went to landfills from Peru to Mozambique to Jakarta to all over Australia to Indonesia, everywhere. I made incredible contacts, and I also engaged with a guy by the name of Ken McBride, an architect, a brilliant architect, who was focused. He designed 100-story buildings in Dubai and the Gold Coast, but he also designed indigenous housing in Kalimantan in Indonesia, and worked with the Aboriginal indigenous people to understand indigenous housing. And when I explained to him that I want to one day build an affordable house out of waste from the environment, out of plastic, we engaged and designed this amazing. Together we designed this house, made out of components that would be a flat pack house, and this was in 2011. We engaged with a polymer chemist, and we were really excited about what we could do. But what eventuated was that you can't build structural beams out of polymer. There's not enough structural integrity to be able to build a beam. We could make panels, but not the beam. So what happened was I worked with Ken. We came up with this incredible design. We won the Good Design Awards in Australia for sustainable housing, which was not just about housing. The Sustainable Award design, the awards were for everything from a toothbrush to Tesla, you know. So in our category, we won that. And it was about a panel that could be made in one panel that was the floor, the wall, and the roof. The profile of that panel, and it was to be made out of recycled plastic. So I'm leaving lots out here because in the meantime, I've sacked 2 CEOs. So this gets into the business about know your client, know your CEO, know it a bit better, do a bit more research. I'm not sure if I should go out on this tangent now, but it gives a bit of background to how I got to where I am now. So I've got this company, traveled the world, deal falls over, I'm going to landfills, I'm running out of money, I find myself in Indonesia in 2012 in Jakarta, speaking with the government, but I'm almost flat broke, and this is because of everything that I'd done leading up to that stage, and it sounds hard to believe considering my past, but hey, shit happens, and I'm struggling to get this company off the ground, this plastics recycling company. And I find myself in Jakarta, and a whole bunch of really negative things happened when I was there. And I spent 7 months without coming home in Indonesia. Like, I will never give up. And others suffered around me, like my wife, Debbie, and my kids. And, my son was going through his graduation from university, and I wasn't there for him. So the downside of being the type of person that I am is you hurt people along the way, unintentionally. And there's nothing worse than someone suggesting that you don't care, or you don't have empathy, or it's all about you. There's nothing worse than that, because it's not all about me. It's not. My name's on everything, so yes, I'm guilty of that. But it's not. It's just the way life rolls sometimes. And yes, we all make the wrong decisions, but no one has a crystal ball. And when you make a decision on the spot and it's agreed by yourself and maybe your board of directors or maybe your family and friends that it's a good thing to do, then that's it. That decision was made on that day. If something goes wrong in the near future, you don't have a crystal ball. You don't know that that's going to happen. And I'm sorry that it happened, but shit happens. So I find myself in Jakarta with some really, really bad people, like not even realizing how even this happened. And these bad people were meant to be involved with the UN. They were bringing people out from Africa that had tons of money, and that there were sons and daughters of despots or sons and daughters of whoever, and they were coming to Jakarta, and supposedly the Jakarta government, the Indonesian government, was bringing these people in for their money and giving them safe haven. And it was all done under the auspices of the UN. This was what I was told. And I started investing in these opportunities because what I was told that this money is going to come in, and that money is going to be used to develop the plastics recycling thing, because the government of Indonesia wanted solutions for their waste problem. So I went in heels and all, not realizing that it was a total scam. This was Nigerian scammers. This was before people knew that these scams were happening. So I was right at the forefront of the Nigerian scams about the UN, and you can Google it, about black money, how money gets transferred around the world by the US government to help developing nations or, whatever, but it's got dye on the money so that so can't take the money and spend it. They've got to have a special formula to get rid of the dye, and then that money can get used. That was all real. I did all my research. But in fact, I was being taken for a ride, and the guy that I was with, who had the UN connections, was also being taken for a ride. It was unbelievable. So
this was tied into opportunities where you were investing your money in opportunities that tied back into them building with your materials, with
correct.
your panels. Okay.
And this is just before I've made the connection with speaking to Governor Jokowi. So this is
Got it.
again,
Okay.
I'm not going to drill this down too much, but this is again another situation where you can go from the darkest moment, and I'm telling you, it was dark. I remember being in a fetal position on the 33rd level of a high rise in Jakarta, going, I've completely, excuse the French, fucked my life.
Yeah.
I'm done. I can't even go home.
And this is when you were in Jakarta and you realized that what you had been investing in, that you had bought into this idea that this was going to turn into something for, at the time, Nev House, and
Yep.
trying to take these plastics and turn them into building materials that could be house the poor. And
Yep.
Indonesia had an appetite for it. You found
Yep.
out this whole thing was a scam, and you'd put all your money into it.
And you know what? You know how I found out it was a scam? I was getting really nervous about some of the things, and I could go into all the detail, but that's for a book one day maybe. But when I was going into this, then I get a friend who calls me and says, "I just watched 60 Minutes last night." He knew what I was doing in Jakarta. Just watched 60 Minutes. They just did a story on exactly what's happening to you in Jakarta. It was like,
Whoa.
oh my God. So that happened, but this gets back to this thing. You know what happened? I was with this guy. His name was Guy Joseph. And his background was that his father brought the Beatles to Australia. And he lived in Indonesia. He was a muso. And he used to bring the Beatles and Tina Turner, everybody, to Kuta in the early 70s to shoot up heroin and stuff. It was the stories behind all these people are incredible. So we had a bodyguard because all these Nigerians were coming to the place. And the bodyguard, after the event, the events are just horrendous, but after the event, the bodyguard said to me, "Nev, I love what you're doing." He kind of came out of his shell. He said, "We've got to get away from this Guy because he's been taken for a ride." But my boss, he deals with corruption in Indonesia, government and secular corruption. And his company, he wants to speak with you. So I went and spoke. We had a meeting with him, and he said, "We can get you in front of the Jokowi governor." No way. So I had all these meetings. I spoke at this big event and went back a couple of times and met with waste management companies and all sorts of stuff. Then I went back to Bali. I was going back and forth to Bali to keep my head together in that 7-month period. And I never get sick. I'm as healthy as you can possibly get. I couldn't tell you the last time I got sick. But when I was in Bali, back and forth from Jakarta, I got dengue fever because my immune system was so low. I was so down and so tired. And I was going back to Bali. You know who I was staying with in Bali? I was staying with Ketut Menda, my buddy, who was the ex-pro surfer, who I love him like a brother. We call each other brother with a BRUDDA from another mother, brother from another mother. And he looked after me, and I through the dengue and the whole thing. And while I was there, back and forth, I met this group of people and who really loved what I was doing. I was introduced to them by some really good people in Bali. One guy in particular who is called the Soul Man, SOLE Man, and he an English guy who walked around Bali to raise money for the poor. He was the guy who introduced me to this guy who had a team, and they loved what I was doing, and they caught me at a time when I was really down. All I wanted to do was go home, but I couldn't even afford my ticket to go home. They put their arms around me and said, "We can turn this into something good." Turns out this guy was a born-again Christian. Now, forgive me for saying this, but I was once too a born-again Christian back in the early 80s. I went to India in 1980 and preached the gospel on the streets of India. to tell the Hindus and the Muslims that what they were believed in was wrong, and they need to believe in the salvation of Jesus Christ. And I completely and utterly deny that as the way forward. I'm actually not agnostic. I am atheist. I do not believe at all, and I might turn a lot of people off now. I'm sorry, but I think I have enough experience to understand that there is not a God or various gods manipulating me or manipulating others dependent on how committed we are. So we won't go down that road, but I have preached the gospel in India. I've stood next to a pastor who's told me that this woman who's got a hole in her stomach with cancer is healed, and all this other stuff. These poor, untouchable people, 2,000 of them in the audience. And I was just going, this is not right. I don't get this. So there I am in Indonesia, can't go home, and here's this guy who tells me he's a born-again Christian. Well, great. Okay, so then he tells me his history. He tells me that he was busted. So it's a horrible long story, but he was charged. He was living in Australia. He was worth a fortune, and he was extradited to the UK for embezzling money out of a pension fund in the UK. He told me the whole story, and I'm thinking, well, why do I want to get into bed with this guy and his team? So I Googled him and searched, and he told me the whole story, and he said, I was acquitted in the High Court. I fought the case myself. And I Googled him, and he was acquitted. The people below him in the company that he was with, they went to prison, 8 years. And I'm thinking, and this guy's telling me all I want to do, Nev, is I want to do good. And what you've got here is incredible. And this guy was a genius, a financial genius. He was so over the next couple of years, we brought on investors. We travelled the world. We went to say for example, we were invited by the Philippine government. We met with the Aquino government in the Coconut Palace in Manila. We met with the vice president of the Philippines. Then we went to Tacloban. We were invited to go there by Imelda Marcos. I'm not making this up. We met Imelda in her apartment. Doesn't mean that we condone the behaviour of Ferdinand and Imelda at all. Just means that we met her. We saw all the Picassos and the Renoirs and the gold bars in her apartment. She wanted us to go to Tacloban, which was her hometown, which was destroyed by the hurricane. Her family home was completely destroyed. We went there, met with the mayor, who was the nephew of Imelda, and said that we can supply a solution for transitional housing for these people that their lives have been destroyed. We did all this. We went to PNG, we went to Vanuatu, we did all this good stuff. But guess what? This guy was a flawed human, as we all are. And he had a problem with money, he had a problem with drugs, he had a problem with women. He was married with 3 young children. And all of this started rolling out before my eyes when I was going back and forth from Australia to Bali, because that's where we were based. And we had raised money, but when we had set up a sample house in Vanuatu at huge cost to the company to show that we could build a Category 5 hurricane-rated house made out of recycled materials in Port Vila. We did that in early 2015. And we're thinking the world is our oyster. We're going to close all these deals. We were talking with the Papua New Guinean government. We've been back and forth to PNG. We've met with the Prime Minister. We've met with all the ministers of government. We weren't naive enough to know that they were full of corruption too, but we were making serious headway in Vanuatu. And we were at the point in early 2015 that we had discussions about contracts with both governments, and they were in the hundreds of millions of dollars. Now, and this was coming from funds offshore and all sorts of stuff. So this guy started embezzling money out of the company, shareholders' capital. He started living the high life before we'd even signed the contracts. And I started pulling him into lines. Some of the other guys were freaking out, but he was a very powerful, very strong personality. And I was thinking, if we get rid of this guy, then the company's going to fail and all this sort of negative stuff. And then one day, I get a call from the CFO, who was a family friend of this guy back in the UK, young guy, 25 years old, but really smart, like almost autistic smart with numbers. Incredible. He calls me one day and goes, Nev, just got the document. It states the document being his deal. His deal that he put forward to us, the board of directors, was $90,000 US, 3.5% of gross turnover, and $2.1 million that was owed to him. And I went, what? He's sacked. He's out. Gone.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
In a heartbeat. It took me 1 second to tell him he's gone. So first of all, $90,000 US is a joke. A month, not a year, a month. 3.5% of turnover on the contracts that he had put together that we were looking at closing, et cetera, et cetera. I did a quick calculation, $13 million he was going to get in the first year out of all the deals, and that we owed him $2.1 million. And I said, we don't owe him a cent. What are you talking about? And there was no money owed to this guy. So, I mean, I could go into the detail, but there's nothing owed to him. So I sacked him. In the meantime, we had taken on a guy from Deloitte that was setting up, because of the same deals that we had on the table, NetSuite, which is a CRM program, and it was Deloitte. Mm-hmm. And he had seen what we had gone through with this guy, and he was furious too. And he said, hey guys, look, I'm keen to come on board as your CEO. You need a CEO. You've got shareholders. We're an unlisted public company in Australia. So we bring this guy on board. I didn't do any due diligence on him because he was Deloitte. He was an IT partner in Deloitte. So he said. Turns out this guy completely misrepresented his wealth, his position, his salary. We put him on at a very high rate because he said he was going to bring in the top end of town from Sydney to investors, and we'd already done the house in Vanuatu. We were about to deliver 15 community centres and classrooms in Vanuatu after Cyclone Pam. And all that was happening. And then all he's doing is pulling his money out every month. And we started freaking out at my board of directors and got to the point where I sacked him. Again, 6 months after putting him on, I sacked him. He was pulling out his full salary once a month, $53,000 a month, pulling it out of the company, and the company was not in revenues, and we hadn't closed the deals yet. The company was failing, and he was causing it to fail because he was
pulling out cash. Yeah,
he was trying to do a backdoor takeout of the company to this point, and this is very relevant. I'm driving through Sydney with him one day, and he said to me, Nev, you know, I've just bought this house in Freshwater, 5.5 mil, and you know, but mate, you're not commercial. I said, what do you mean? He goes, well, you know, all your shareholders and everything, they've done their money, mate. I'm going, what do you mean they've done their money? I said, well, we can't bring them on. The company's losing money. Well, I know why the company's losing money, mate. Your investors haven't come on board yet. Yeah, but no, those investors have lost their money. Just face it, mate. I said, fuck off. Excuse me, again for the French. They haven't, and I'm not walking away from my investors. So that was a point where our relationship kind of started to go sour. Because I was the chairman, and he worked for me. He was the CEO. He worked for the shareholders, right? So things started getting worse and worse. We delivered in Vanuatu, and then that was in April of 2016. By August, I'd sacked him. We found out through through forensic. My brother, who I mentioned before, is a detail guy. He did a forensic thing on the server. Found out that he didn't buy the house in Freshwater. He was $36,000 behind in his rent. He had misrepresented how much he had earned from Deloitte. He was trying to get money out of his super to pay his rent. And we found a letter between his wife and himself where his wife was telling him how to word the letter, the email to us to say that he was literally doing a backdoor takeout of the company. He was going to demote me to virtually nothing, give me a small percentage. He was going to become the chairman or whatever and bring all these shareholders in. So I sacked him. Didn't hear from him for a year. So he had no money. Didn't hear from him at all. So that was August 2016. In 2017, I think he's walked away. So and he had a 5-year contract. So I took a huge risk in sacking him. So I'm getting on with the job with the rest of my team. We set up a fund in Luxembourg. We were approached by a group in Luxembourg to set up a fund to deliver our solution of waste in the environment and building homes. We jumped through all the hoops that you could possibly imagine, all through 2017. I actually travelled around Australia with the finance minister from Luxembourg. I can't even believe this happened. Talking about, and we set up a RAFE, a Reserved Alternate Investment Fund, the first company in Australia to set up a RAFE. The fund was established. We were talking with investors. Then I get an invite from a good friend of mine, Jane Ferguson, who happened to be the sister of Sarah Ferguson, the Duchess of York. She said, "Nev, I love what you're doing. Come to Sydney." Spoke with her. She said, "You've got to do this thing called Pitch at Palace. It's going to be at Bond University on the Gold Coast.
Yep.
In November. You've got to do it, mate." So I said, "Okay, I'll do it. Yeah, that's fine. Great. Thanks, Jane." Came home, forgot about it. It's about a week out. Jane says, "We've got to do this thing, Nev. Are you ready?" I said, "Yeah, sure. What do I have to do?" "Nev, you didn't listen to me the first time. You got to speak for 3 minutes on stage. You got to do your pitch, and it's an elevator pitch, and you might get your Nev House thing going." So I rock up at Bond University thinking that, not unprepared, completely unprepared. No, I was prepared. I had a little PDF, and I'm walking into the university, and I see Prince Andrew and all the media. I didn't even know he was going to be there. This is well before the shit hit the fan with Prince Andrew, right? So here's royalty. I'm going, oh my God, what have I done? So I go in, I sit, and there's 100 of the wealthiest people on the Gold Coast, all the hobnobs and Prince Andrew and everyone, sports stars and all sorts of stuff, and a whole bunch of people doing a pitch. So I was second up. So I do my pitch, and the host goes, he looks to the crowd, and he goes, "Well, what do we do now?" In other words, and I'm not boasting, but he kind of like, wow. So I won with about 4 or 5 others into the next round at Wollongong University. Then I won from that round into the Australia House, Governor House in Sydney. And now it's the top-notch, top of the town in Sydney. And I won into the final round at St James Palace in London, fully paid by, and I kind of became really friendly with Prince Andrew, and had some funny stories about that. But so eventually, I find myself in London, and at a big gala dinner the night before, 600 people in St James Palace, clinking champagne glasses and everything. And then I get invited when I say, "Oh, time to sit down," and there's people with their name tags, and Black Rock and The Economist magazine, and everyone's there. SoftBank, and I go to sit down, and they say, "No, Mr. Hyman, you're at table 1." So table 1, I'm sitting next to Prince Andrew, next to the keynote speaker, The Economist magazine, and SoftBank on my table. Yeah, and anyway, following day, do my pitch, and I win. So now I'm the Entrepreneur of the Year for Pitch at Palace, which was a huge thing. There was thousands of people, wanted to do it. Hundreds of companies pitched around the world, and 14 companies were invited to London, the final pitch, and I won the pitch on a 3-minute pitch about how we can turn plastic waste into building materials to make homes for the poor. So everything's going great. I'm meeting with all these banks, everyone from the Warburgs, the Rothschilds, and I'm not making that up. I met with the Warburg Bank. I met with the Rothschilds, as evil as that sounds. Met with all the big banks in Zurich and London and family offices. And I was just building this amazing. We were trying to raise €200 million in the fund. I'm sitting in London in January 2018. And there's a phone, and the fund manager, this lady Miriam, gets a phone call, and it's this guy that I sacked. He's seen all the news, because I was all over the news about winning this event, and he's thought that I've made a shitload of money on the back of Nev House. So he starts legal action against me. He said, I'm taking action against Nev Hyman, the company, and the fund. And he had a barrister and 2 lawyers on contingency. We found that out later. So then I came home. I had to shut the fund down. After speaking on stage with Bob Geldof and Gina Miller, the famous politician, about the environment in Luxembourg, to a company that had $245 billion under management, SCG, I had to shut the fund down because you can't raise capital if you're in litigation. So that's why I rock up in the US trying to raise capital, because I've just then, from 2018, this is before COVID, and I met you before COVID, 2018, 2019, I'm now regrouping. I've come home, my beautiful wife is just can't deal with it anymore. She's moved out. I'm struggling. I've got legal bills. I've got all this drama. I had to fight this guy to the point where my barrister said, you will smash this guy out of the ballpark. He does not have a leg to stand on. But Nev, if you keep doing this, your company will fail. You cannot afford it. So I had to pay this guy out, which just killed me.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And these are the lessons that you learn, right? And I could have I had people saying, Nev, just walk away, mate. Just
And
walk
was
away
this
from
because
the board.
was this because he had a 5-year contract with you and you cut him early?
Yeah.
Huh.
And he didn't do a thing for a year until he realized that I had some money, which I didn't
Wow,
have.
what a trip.
Yeah. And he's anyway.
Okay, so you paid him out.
Paid him out, and I'm now regrouping here in Australia. I'm trying to keep my shit together. And again, my people were saying, Nev, walk away. Just bankrupt yourself. Don't worry about it. Just walk away from everything. I am not going to walk away from my shareholders. I am not going to walk away from people who invested in me until I have absolutely no opportunity, no chance not to. In the US, people bankrupt themselves left, right, and center, and they just start again. No way am I doing that. Unless I have absolutely no alternative. So I just dug my heels in deep with incredibly ethical, passionate new people on board, starting with my brother, starting with a guy by the name of Austin
What a trip.
Whitaker. Yeah,
You brought your brother in? Yep.
Yep,
Okay.
Austin Whitaker, who was an
Yep.
ex Navy SEALs, SAS, worked with the FBI, Commando, worked in waste management. That was his background as a strategist. Then a guy called Leon Steffen, who's the CFO, who owns these guys came on board as directors, and another guy, Matt Henry, who's involved with the marketing. I had a team around me to make this work, who worked for nothing, for zero, because they believed in what we had and believed it. And over the next 2 years, we eventually got Australian Building Code standard for Nev House, for a Category 5 rated structure that can be built in 2 days, flat pack, architecturally designed, that can withstand a 320 kilometre an hour piece of 3x2 shot out of a cannon. So we have that now. We've achieved that on zero revenues, on zero capital, over the between 2018 and 2020. Then I go through Lance Bowling, I go to the US. I get invited to go and speak in 2019 to speak at a green housing summit in Tennessee, of all places, Knoxville, Tennessee. And this wonderful woman, Carol, I speak at this event at the Clayton House at the University of Tennessee, not knowing who Clayton was. So Clayton is Clayton Homes, owned by Warren Buffett and Kevin Clayton in Tennessee. So I speak at this event and then meet all these great people and then go to meet with Kevin Clayton and everyone at Clayton Homes. They love what I had, blah, 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 made fantastic connections. And then I'm coming home after all of that, and I meet with Lance, who's an old surfing buddy who reached out to me, and he goes, I want to get involved. I want to help you here. So, and then I come up and saw you, and I can't remember if I'd already set up the fund or not, but
You're talking about
through
the
Lance,
Opportunity Fund?
yeah, was that after you or before?
You started setting it up after we met.
That's right. Okay, so we meet, and yes, I am now looking for investors. Yes, for 2.5 months, and I rented a car once for 2 days and stayed in one hotel for one night. Everywhere I went, these incredible people put me up, not because they knew I was down and out. They just went, "Yeah, come stay with us." And normally I
Yeah.
say, "No, I'll stay down the road."
Yeah.
And you did
Yeah.
the same. You did the same.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
just had this fantastic journey, and didn't spend a brass razoo. It was, you can do this shit when you never give up, and I will not give up.
Oh my
I do
God.
need a little help from my friends still to this day. We still need to close a deal, but the point is, I've had good people around me since um, 2018 to now, and we are achieving stuff like it's so exciting right now. But that's, I've had to sack CEOs to protect my investment and to protect the interests of my shareholders. And as you know, and I don't mind talking about this, but I thought I'd gotten through in almost everything. So 2019, meet with you. 2020, getting all this certification. Now we're making really good progress. Um, in 2019, I was invited by Corona and the World Surf League to build a Nev house on the beach in Bali to talk about how we could take waste out of the environment and turn it into housing. So we literally built a house on the beach, which became in itself its own nightmare, which almost broke me because we had all sorts of drama in doing that. But we did get the message out there. But at that time, one of my shareholders he wanted his money back. Now, this particular guy, he invested in the company in 2014, and then he applied to become the general manager of the company in 2014 under the first CEO. He wasn't up to speed, and he was removed. Came back to Australia. He was still a friend. It was okay. 2017, I think I did a podcast with him for about 3 hours, spilled my guts with him. Everything I thought was fine. In 2019, I found out later though, but 2019 he wanted his money back because has gone through some issues. But as an investor, you don't just give shareholders their money back; they just got to wait for it to turn around. I think Elon Musk said that it takes 10 years for a startup to get off the ground. Not everybody gets overnight success. Yes, our company had made a number of mistakes, but the goal had not changed. And the key people had all done the right things. And I will say I was doing the right thing by my shareholders, sacking CEOs, moving forward, getting past the shit and making and not giving up. So here's this guy who's saying, "I want my money back." And I said, "Well, you can't." So what does he do? I find out through a friend who was on the email list. He sends an email out to some key shareholders that he believed were not happy. He sent, and I see the email, and the email's basically saying, "Hey guys, we're going to hold Nev to account. He's done this, he's done that." I'm going, "What?" Because I was the chairman, the buck stops with me, like the president of the United States. The buck stops with him. So yeah, I
Yep.
take that responsibility on board. I'm not denying that. But I've always had a board of directors. Every decision we made with the company from day one has been made jointly with a board of directors. Some of those decisions were made with this guy in the room, right? So he's now wanting his money back. So what does he do? He goes in the email. He says, "I know we can't sort of go him legally. So I've got a friend in the Australian Financial Review. I'm going to go to her." So in that email, he's CC'd some of my more well-known shareholders, Kirk Pengilly from INXS, Lane Beachley, Sally Fitzgibbon, 7 times world surfing champion, Lane Beachley, Sally Fitzgibbons, professional surfer at the time, and a bunch of people who are close friends of mine who invested in me to deliver this project and were suffering too as how long it was taking. And I take that on board. But they were still believers in me, as hard as that is to believe. So he mentions them. So I reached out to them. "We don't know anything about this, Nev. What are you talking about?" So they weren't even involved. So he goes to the press. I am told by this journalist that calls me, which I didn't, sends us an email saying, "We are doing the story on you. would you like to speak with us? I went to my PR agent and they said, do not speak to any don't speak to her, do not speak to the PR agent. This is going to be a beat up. It's in the Australian Financial, which is like the Wall Street Journal or something, we did a narrative. We were told, just tell the story from your side, send the narrative, and she can quote from the narrative. And so the story finally comes out, and mate, I tell you, I have never had bad press in my life. I've always had good press, right? Apart from people that were jealous about what we were doing with Firewire and some grumpy old surfboard shapers that didn't like me changing the industry. Apart from that, I've never had bad press. And this article comes out. It's Nev House of Cards. Oh. I was just gutted. I cried again. Like what is going on here? I'm reading this article and it's just full of just shit. Now, the photograph that they use in the article is actually quite funny when you think about it. It's not funny, but the photograph was me, my first CEO, and Imelda Marcos. So it was a salacious story. Why was there a photograph of me and Imelda Marcos and this guy who was a known embezzler in the UK? That's what the general public knew about these two other people. Well, then Nev must be a fraud too. Mm-hmm. Now, as I've shared with you, the meeting with Imelda happened by chance because one of the wealthiest guys in the Philippines, 10 families own the Philippines, and the guy that introduced us to the Aquino government, which is the opposite to the Romualdez side of politics in the Philippines, they're like Democrats and Republicans, he said to us, do you want to meet Imelda? So it was like saying, do you want to meet Elvis? Sure. We had an incredible time. 3.5 hours with Imelda Marcos chewing our ears off. We weren't talking about Nev House. We weren't there for business. We were just there as people that heard this amazing story, looking at photos of Andy Warhol and photos of Che Guevara speaking, with her and Imelda. And it was a moment in life that was just incredible. We get back in the limo, and the guy says, the CEO rightly said, guys, we are not using these photos. Don't even think about it. Now, this other guy was involved with the company at that time. He had the photo. So he pulls it out of the files, gives it to the journalist, paints me as being a fraud, and then says all this shit about I was flying back and forth to on shareholders' capital in business class, and that I was living the high life, and that there was missing shareholders' funds, $2.1 million of missing funds. What? No, there wasn't. A, I was sleeping on people's couches every time I went back to Bali. B, I've never flown business in my life except once with my current wife, Debbie, my beautiful wife, Debbie, on points. That's it. Did we owe this guy $2.1 million? No, we did not. That was on the original document that my CFO showed me on the day that I sacked him. That was not true. There's no missing capital. Yes, there was some money embezzled. Yes, I take responsibility for not stopping that from happening. But consider the fact that we did all the good and we're still here. And Nev House is not a house of cards. So those idiots, and I say that very, very strongly, those idiots threw Nev House under the bus selfishly, with the net result that could have been that I would have just given up and walked away from my shareholders, or B, exactly what it did do, which is it killed the fund, the Earth Opportunity Zone Fund. I've had 2 funds killed by idiots. We were talking with investors in Canada and in New York about investing in the Opportunity Zone Fund when that article came out. And the people we were talking with said, Nev, sorry, mate, we can't continue with this. This is bad press. Google your name now. Your name comes up saying that, you're a fraud. Mate, it just killed me. And so, what do? Do I give up? Nope. Just put it behind me, deal with it, and that's what we've been doing since January 2021. It's now getting close to January. 2 years later, we're smashing it out the ballpark. And I'm very, very proud of my team. There's nothing wrong with being proud of yourself for not giving up. And again, I say it again, I've had so many people say, Nev, just walk away. go bankrupt. 3 or 4 years, you'll be out of bankruptcy, and just get on. Just make surfboards. Have a bit of fun. Do what you do. Don't do all this stuff. People invested in you because they believed in you. They believed in the the idea of cleaning up the planet, and it didn't work out. How many times does that happen every day of the week? People lose money in investments. No, I'm not doing that. I'm not going to take the easy road out. And there's a sense of pride too. I couldn't live with myself. And my team held together. And then through Lance again, he introduces us to a company in Argentina called Z1. Now, the important thing about this is that when I was running around the world talking about Nev House, and everything's got my name on it, right from the day one, when I changed from Neville to Nev. So yeah, I've used my brand, and that's fine. But when it got to the point of people asking me, well, what do you do with Nev House, Nev? Well, we've got this great architecture and we take plastic out of the environment. Well, are you a recycler or are you a construction company? So there was a bit of confusion, and there was always a problem. So even my CEO, Austin Whitaker, said to me about 2 years ago, Nev, I think we've got to change the name of the company. And I went, no way. Like the classic form, the classic founder. No.
Yeah.
Like I've spent all this energy developing this brand, and we can do that. And I'm going to be running around the world doing podcasts and talking, going to impact summits, and it's all going to be about me, And that's not my ego talking. It's all about the brand. So, well, maybe there's a little bit of ego there. I don't know. But the point is, we get to this point, and I'm sitting there one day. I've got to change the name of the company, and that doesn't mean that we're doing a phoenix. We're not moving away from Nev House. I'm not walking away from my shareholders. And I'm sitting there, and I knew how hard it was to come up with a new brand. If you're in marketing, it's almost impossible these days to come up with a new brand. Every word, any iteration of any word is already taken. So I'm sitting there, and I'm going, landfill, no more landfills. What can we do? No more land. And I went NoMo, NOMO, and I went, oh, that's pretty cool. NoMo. But yeah, I don't know. And I Googled NoMo, it was taken. NoMo, NoMor, NOMORE, no, that was taken. And then I looked down at my page and I went, I'll just take the E off. NoMor, NOMOR. And I Googled it, bang, got it. I couldn't get nomor.com, but I got nomor.com.au, and I got the trademark and everything. And I went, and I've been in branding all my life, and I went, that's gold. No more landfill, no more ocean plastic, no more this, no more that. People will remember it. And it's all about, I often say, and I hope other people say it too, never name a company a generic name, a generic brand, because no one ever remembers it. If I called Nev House Eco House or Eco this or Polymer that or Poly this, it would get lost. If you got to have a brand that you remember, like what does Billabong mean? What does Nike mean? What does Z1 mean? It doesn't have to mean anything. So I've come up with a lot of words. Well, never say never, never look back, NEV Futureshapes, all these sorts of things. But the term to describe the plastics recycling part of my company is CRPP. It's an acronym, right? CRPP. Like kind of hard to remember, but it's actually what it stands for is Composite Recycled Plastic Panels. So you can say, yeah, Nev's got this company that's called Composite Recycled Plastic Panels. Okay, but when you see it, but if you see CRPP by itself, it actually says crap. And I love it. Funny. And my CEO one day said to me, Nev, we've got to change it. I've got to come up with it. And I said, no, I love it. It's funny. You got to have humor in things. And if people don't like it, too bad. So when you put no more with CRPP, it says no more crap. And I didn't plan to set that out. I didn't plan that. That just happened. No more crap.
So tell us where we're at today and what the future looks like. What are we doing and where are we going?
Well, I'll tell you two things. The journey to get here from 2018 to now included me losing faith in the fact that I'm going to be able to financially get through the shit that I was going into. So I decided, with a bit of prompting from my kids, who all surf, who range from 27 to 35, Dad, you got to start making your surfboards again. Everybody, because the 80s is the new 70s, it's the new 60s. Everybody's
Mm-hmm.
into big hair, the 80s, Barbie, all of that. It's just like, wow. So I had started having people want me to remake boards that I made for those pro surfers back in the 80s. So I started doing that, and then specifically over the last year, I've realized that I've got a very powerful brand that is just sitting there, 40 years of content, and now the market has turned from the surfboard high tech professional surfing Kelly Slater type surfboard to surfboards for beginners through to hipsters through to people, to everybody. You can ride
Yep.
any type of surfboard now and it's cool. 20 years ago, if you rode a longboard, it was very uncool. You could only ride a high performance surfboard, really, or you'd be very uncool, as silly as that sounds.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you don't ride everything, you're not a true waterman. So
Mm.
and then the demographics changed. 5, 10, 15 years ago, you could not sell a surfboard for more than $700. And they're handcrafted pieces of joy, right? Go and buy a set of golf clubs, it'll cost you $2,000 and it costs you $150 every time you go out in the golf course.
Mm-hmm.
Surfing's cheap. So the demographics change. You've got all this millennial youth that have got a lot of money because they can't buy a house, and it's a little bit like the Japanese who can't buy houses, so they spend money on brand. That same sort of thing's kind of happening now. The youth, sadly, can't seem to invest in homes, so they're spending up. So there's not a problem with someone paying $1,000, $2,000, $3,000 for a surfboard. I sold 15 surfboards as copies of my boards from the 80s for $2,000 each. So the demographics changed. So I'm setting up this thing called NEV Customs so that I can use the technology that I helped to develop, the computer shaping network that's
Mm-hmm.
already now established globally, that I got nothing from, but the network of shaping machines around the world is out there now, so that I can simply email a file, a CAD file, a computer-aided design file of my surfboard,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yep.
it can be made locally anywhere in the world. So I'm encouraging local manufacturing, etc. So I'm doing that, and I'm also setting up a factory, a surfboard factory, and I've had more surfboard factories than I think anybody on the planet. I mean, again, that sounds like a silly boast, so forgive me if that does sound like that. But I've had, over the 45 years, 50 years of making surfboards, I've had small factories doing 5 boards a week. I've had horse sheds. I've had surfboards doing 150 surfboards a week. I've got factories in Thailand. I've got factories in that's what I've done over the years. That's been my benchmark. So what I'm doing is I'm setting up Burley board makers. My nirvana, Burley heads. I'm setting up
Yeah.
Burley
Yeah.
board makers.
Back to Burley. Yep.
It is. It's all back to Burley, and I'm setting it up as a craft place, so people can come, stand outside undercover with a beer, and watch their surfboard being machined on the highest tech in the industry. Then they can
Hmm.
walk into the factory and watch a surfboard being hand shaped, like I do with the boards that I sell for $2,000 each. I live stream me hand shaping on TikTok, on Instagram. I got 10.5 million views on TikTok. Like, I know I can capitalize on this because I've got the brand and the personality to be able to make it happen. So I've got this brand developing, and then so those same people, and I want to bring food and entertainment and music into it, so people can come in, watch guys laminating a surfboard with all the different coloured resins and all the logos, and then come outside and have something to eat, and then once in a while we'll have a party in the car park, and we'll have music and live streaming Christian Fletcher or Sean Thompson or someone like that talking to the crowd. That's what I want to do.
I
That's my
see it.
dream. Yeah,
I see the vision.
for my own industry, and others could do this, but I just so happen to have this incredible content. I've got children. My 3 kids are killing it online, and are shepherding me through the process with their businesses, and and I've got good people around me, So I'm going back to my core with the surfboard side of things. That's one thing. So that's why I'm so excited about it. Like, I can't wait to go down to the factory. It's 10 minutes from my door. I live on this beautiful golf course, but I'm actually 10 minutes from the factory, and that's only 2 minutes from Burley Heads. So I can
Mm-hmm.
go down to the factory, go for a surf at Burley, come back to the factory. We all speak the same language. We're all surfers. We've all got history with each other. you've got all these touring surfers from Venezuela, literally, um, um, from Europe, from South America, from everywhere, coming to the Gold Coast to come and surf the waves here. And then they can come from Japan, they can come and hang out at my factory, at our factory, Burley Board Makers, and experience watching their board being made, for them to go in for a surf at Burley and meet with all of us. And I've got a reputation in the industry. People do get excited about meeting me. But this template that I'm setting up is for other surfboard shapers around the world who are far more well known than I am, because they've stayed in the industry for the same length of time, where I kind of exited for a while. And I'm bringing them on board too, some really famous surfboard shapers and things, so that they can tap into the same network. So I'm setting all of that up at the moment. And whilst that's happening, I've sold up everything. I've reduced my debt down to zero, and my wife and I live in a beautiful home here. I'm happy. Our life hasn't changed that much, apart from me not having, I don't mind saying, not having any assets except for myself, my business, and what I'm doing with NoMor. So at my age, Colonel Sanders started, this is quite funny, Colonel Sanders started Kentucky Fried Chicken when he was 65. He was broke at 65, and I'm 65. So Kentucky Fried Chicken, here we come.
So tell me that leads into like third time's the charm with the fund. Are we going back in that direction, or are we going to do something different?
No, I have X amount of shareholders. All the shares have taken up. We don't really want to bring on new shareholders to dilute our shareholders unless something else comes up. But what we have now is a deliverable, and the deliverable. And when I say what we have now is a deliverable, what I kind of allude to is that in the past, Nev House, the solution, what we delivered in Vanuatu, it wasn't a complete solution. We couldn't walk people through a factory to show them the process of turning plastic into the panels. We had R&D facilities in the US, we had et cetera, but it wasn't enough to trigger the investors in the way in which we're doing it now. In a fund, yes, because people invest in funds. They take a bit of a risk to invest in a new technology and a new this and a new that, and they invest that way. But when you're seeking investment in a solution, in the actual solution, times have changed. In the early 2000s, people would invest on an idea. Same with the mid 2000s, like 2013, 12, 13.
It could be a deck.
It could be a deck, and they'll chuck $1 million at it. But now, no one does that. You have to touch and feel. Even government don't do it anymore. Government won't invest. They invest in existing companies with 5 or 10 years of numbers. So where we're at now is NoMor is a technology out of South America that you can go to, walk around the factory, see it work. CRPP is a technology out of the UK that are our partners. You can walk around that factory and see the panels being made. So those two technologies are lines. They are simply technologies that get delivered, just like buying a computer, putting it on the floor, joining it together, adding a thing called a MRF, a Materials Recovery Facility, an MRF, which is where municipal solid waste goes to, MSW waste. MSW waste is everyday household waste. It's everyday commercial waste from shops and hotels and airlines. That waste generally goes to landfill. So for all of you out there, there's really basically, this is the story. You have a recycle bin. Here in Australia, it's a yellow bin, and you have a green bin. The household waste goes into the green bin that's organic and stuff that can't be recycled. There's even a red bin, which is purely organic, like food. The yellow bin is the recycle bin. From that bin, it goes to a facility, and the clear plastic bottles, the milk bottles, maybe the yogurt containers, the tin cans, the aluminium cans, the paper, the cardboard, that all gets taken out of the line. Some of the fines, they call it fines, get taken out. The glass gets crushed and some of that gets taken out. Whatever's left over is called residual waste. Now that residual waste goes to landfill. And that residual waste is what is pouring CO2 into the environment. That residual waste is a thing, and I only learnt this yesterday, why landfills are on fire in Indonesia now. You know why they're on fire? It's not because someone's lit a fire. It's because lithium batteries are the batteries of the future. And a lithium battery, if it is hit, if you drop your iPhone and smack it with a hammer and open the battery, that battery can self-ignite. That's why they do. There are lithium batteries in vapes, and those little batteries that are in vapes that get thrown into the garbage and end up in the landfill go and rest in the layer of the landfill, and then over time, that battery then self-combusts, and that's why the landfills are on fire. So what happens is that residual waste goes to landfill. What we do, what NoMor does, and what Z1 does in Argentina, and proven it scientifically, is that they have a system where all the waste gets taken out, the recyclables get taken out, the residual waste gets put into this thing they call the baby. And the baby is this proprietary technology that's been developed by Juan Gosto in Argentina, a brilliant scientist, a very wealthy man that wants to change the environment and help here. All that goes in there, and what it gets biostabilized or gets purified, and out comes the other side, and the process does not emit emissions during the process like some other.
This is the off-gassing thing that we've talked about before, right? No off-gassing?
Correct. No off-gassing, because it's a contained chamber. There's other processes called autoclaves, and they emit emissions that are dangerous to the environment, so as does incineration. You know, no matter what they say, it's damaging the environment. This system does not emit any nasties in the process. Let's say there's 100 tonne comes in a day of residual MSW waste. We will take out most of the plastics, every single skerrick of plastic, every bit of soft plastic, all the plastics no one wants. We, being CRPP, take that out. The rest of that waste goes into this baby. What comes out after all the moisture and everything else, out of 100 tonne, about 50 tonne remains. So what remains is a fluff, a fibrous material that's, I don't like using, I've been told not to use the word inert, but it's as close to as inert as possible. All of that material can then be used for a series of things. It can be used, if you picture a pyramid, the very bottom use of that, the least profitable use of that is ADC, which is alternate daily cover, that landfill operators must do. So they bulldoze all the landfill, then they bring in 6 inches or 150 mil of landfill cover, which has got to be clean cover, and bulldoze and then pack it down and do it again like a sandwich. The next up the pyramid that's more profitable is RDF. So this material is highly calorific, and it can be used as RDF to fire cement kilns and things like that instead of coal. The next rung up is to use that same material to replace cement in concrete blocks. Now, a BESA block or a concrete block, which is usually 200 millimeters by 200 by 400 long, whatever that is in inches, is the block that everybody uses globally to build homes. Developing nations, developed nations, whatever. So we've been advised, make something that everybody needs. That's why. We are embodying carbon inside a concrete block and reducing the amount of concrete that needs to be made to make that block. Now, making concrete is one of the big polluters. So we're reducing the carbon output, and we're also embodying the carbon in a concrete block permanently to build homes. With our pilot plant, this is why people are so excited about it now, our pilot plant that we're seeking investment for at the moment receives 100 tonne a day. Now, if we operate the plant 24/7, we will process 100 tonne. We may not operate it 24/7, so therefore we may not process 100 tonne. But let's just keep it at 100 tonne. From 100 tonne, we get 53 tonne that we can use to make the blocks. 53 tonne equate to 12,000 blocks. 12,000 blocks make 7. There's enough blocks there to make 7 200 square metre or 650 square foot homes. So you imagine a non-for-profit somewhere in the world that runs this plant, takes all the plastics out, diverting everything from landfill, takes those blocks and builds homes for the poor in their local region. Or imagine a wealthy investor doing it and selling the blocks into the local community. Or imagine a county or a council setting up a facility on a landfill, so there's reducing the logistics, because residual waste, guess where residual waste comes from? The waste gets picked up on the street, the trucks take that waste to various material recovery facilities. They process the waste, and there's always residual waste left over. Then they truck that waste to the landfill. What we're saying is build the plant on the landfill. The trucks go straight to the landfill. In Australia, the fees to dump residual waste range between $85 a tonne to $150 a tonne of MSW residual waste. That means that the council or county can still pay that, but they're diverting the waste. So we as a company get the revenues of that gate fee. Or we offer the local county or community to split it. So what that means is we still get a revenue before we've even opened the door in the morning, or we've opened the door and the waste has come in, and the local community, the local ratepayers, are actually making money. They're saving money. The local county or council waste comes at a cost to every county, every government on the planet. It's a cost to government. We are turning that around to a profit and an environmental position, a net zero position, an embodying, sequestering carbon position. That's what NoMor is doing. And I haven't heard of any other solution, and I hope there are other solutions. I don't want to be the only solution. The problem's too big. Incineration's not the solution. The Gold Coast City Council, where I live, have about 600 tonne a day that they have to deal with. And they have a 10-year moratorium on the 2 landfills that are on the Gold Coast, about 30 kilometres apart. Their answer was, we love what you're saying, that's fantastic, but we're considering incineration. To incinerate 300 to 600 tonne a day of waste on the Gold Coast would cost the Gold Coast City Council, I don't know, 2, 3, 4, 500, $600 million. And there would be a public outcry to have this giant monolith of a factory, not necessarily belching out shit, but it's not perfect. It's not going to be the solution. So the NoMor solution, from my perspective, and until someone else tells me you're gagging, Nev, and I like to say when I go into a room of mayors and waste management people and scientists, which I have done many, many, many times, the first thing I say is, ladies and gentlemen or friends, I am the dumbest guy in the room here, please. I want you to tell me, if I say something that does not ring true or you disagree with it, tell me. Don't let me walk out the room and say, he's full of shit. Just tell me. And, I had the guy from the scientist at the Gold Coast City Council say, so Mr. Hyman, what you're saying is, at the end of the day, there will be no waste left on the floor, that no waste is going to landfill? I don't know. I can't get my head around that. And I said, well, yes. I said, okay, look, I'll go and check with my partners in Argentina one more time. So I called Rafa, my buddy, who's the lawyer connection we have. And I said, Rafa, can you ask Juan one more time, is there anything left on... Nev, stop it. There is no more waste left on the floor. Just go back and tell them there's no more. That's it. So that's the solution everybody should be looking for. Now, this opens a little bit of a Pandora's box for me personally and for my tribe, my surfing tribe. And the reason I say this is that when I was in Luxembourg, I spoke at many impact summits. I spoke at PricewaterhouseCoopers in Luxembourg in front of 50 suits. I spoke with non-surfers all over the world, and there is a level of intrigue about surfers. Here's this redhead bloke who's travelled the world, surfed all these pristine islands around the world. Geez, I wish I could do that. Maybe we'll go there one day. So there's a certain element of, wow, these guys, these surfers, they really live an amazing lifestyle. I'm not saying that we're the only ones. There's mountain climbers and there's all sorts of different people doing different things. But the surf culture has permeated society globally, which will lead us to our surf lakes discussion towards the end of this. And when you're sitting in the group of people who are looking at you, you've got a level of a foot in the door of credibility to a point. And I'm sitting there saying, the environment's in this state. We need to do something about it. And before COVID, everybody was talking about the Pacific gyres. It was all over the news every day. And all the surfers around the world were getting on board, like the Surfrider Foundation, Parlay for the Ocean, For Ocean, and even companies like the Plastic Bank. I met with David from Plastic Bank when I was, etc. A lot of energy going out there to find a solution for low-grade plastics. Then all the discussion about reducing single-use plastics, all fantastic initiatives. But they're all Band-Aids. And I say this as respectfully as I could possibly say it. They are Band-Aids. Boyan Slats, at I think 17,
the Ocean
did a
Cleanup
video.
Project.
Yeah, yep. He did a video back at the same time in 2013 that I was starting Nev House. And because he was young, really cool, good looking, everything that I'm not, because he put out this video and he raised a mill or something straight up, and then Peter Thiel's from Silicon Valley gave him $30 million. Now, this is at a time when people chuck money at things and there was no chance of return on investment. Well, maybe that's untrue, but it is and was rocket science to put a big sieve out in the ocean. And I'm not knocking. Yep. I'm so proud of this young man for doing this. It's incredible what he's done and the backing that he got. But if I got 30 million US back in 2013 and we delivered what we were planning on doing, which was to commoditize low-grade plastic waste, to get the poor picking up the waste, putting it in a bag and being paid to do it. That was my plan. Now, if you were able to do that, and for those out there that don't really understand why there is waste out in the Pacific or in the Atlantic, why? We all know it comes off land, but no. It comes from, in the Pacific, the 10 largest rivers in the Asia-Pacific region. And
they're just throwing filters at the edge of the rivers, and they're trying to just scrape up what's in the patch.
That's what they're doing.
It's
but where
Band-Aid,
does it start? It starts in the household. It starts in the people that don't know what to do with this stuff. So what they do in developing nations, they throw it in the riverbed in the dry season. And then the monsoons hit and it washes down the rivers out into the oceans. And it happens everywhere in the world, but it happens mostly in the 10 biggest rivers in the Asia-Pacific region. Most of it's not coming off the coast of California. Most of it's not coming off the coast of Australia. It's coming out of the Malaysia and the Philippines and Indonesia. Now, that's not their fault. But if I've proven that, because I've been on the landfills, I've spoken to the pickers in Jakarta, in Bali, and in Peru and everywhere. And I know that if, and I'll give one specific example. I'm standing on a landfill in Bali, the Guinness landfill. And when I first saw this in 2012, it was a hole in the ground. And I was there with
Is this the one by the airport?
No, this is another one. This is a small landfill that was near the giant one near the airport. Okay. Now, the small landfill in Guinness, which is near Ubud in Bali, which is where all the hippies go and live, and the Silicon Valley wealthy people send their kids to the school there at the Green School. Amazing place. So there's a landfill there that was started by an environmentalist that was doing aerobic digestion. And it was a hole in the ground when I went there with Karen Donald, a really good friend of mine in Indonesia, English lady. And it was a hole in the ground. We go, wow, this is fantastic. This is the future. I went back there in 2019. It's a giant mountain. That hole in the ground has become a giant mountain. So I'm standing on the edge of this giant mountain of garbage, all illegal, because they can't. The government in Bali wasn't allowing the trucks to go to the big landfills, so they were sending the trucks every day, hundreds of trucks every day, to illegal landfills everywhere, which I've been on and seen all of them. And we said, I said to the pickers that were on the ground filling up 10-kilo bags of plastic waste, and I said, how much do you get here? We get 2,200 rupiah a kilo for unsorted plastic waste and 4,400 kilo for sorted plastic waste. And the landfill operator was there, and I said, look, technically I can pay you 5,000 rupiah, a kilo for unsorted plastic, because we don't really need it sorted. But you can sort it, that's fine. And oh, by the way, see the other containers over here that you've left behind? Or, sir, we don't want... No, I want those. I want all that soft plastic. I want all that mixed film plastic that you're leaving behind in the landfill. I want that too, because we can use that. So then I was invited by 4Ocean, the company that puts the bangle on your wrist, and we invest in the company by doing that. And they're doing a fantastic job of cleaning up beaches around the world. Fantastic job. I'm not criticizing these companies. Please, I'm not. They invite me to go and have a look at their facility in Denpasar. There's 30 tonne of plastic waste in bags, and I've got photos of me in there. I made a little video about it, which I'd be happy to share one day. And I'm looking at all the bags of sorted plastics and going, yeah, that's great, we can use all that. And then the unsorted plastic. Then I said to the guy that was operating, the Indonesian guy, come with me. So I filmed him walking out with me with my phone. We walked out into the paddock next door, and I said, I want all that plastic blowing around in the wind there that's in the gutter, I want that too. And I'm going to give you 5,000 rupiah a bag. And his eyes lit up and went, what? I've had the same conversation in Mozambique, in Peru, in Jakarta. I know that this will work. Why will it work? Because we can use the low-grade plastic.
So tie this back to what you were talking about, where this creates sort of a Pandora's box for the surf community.
Yeah, okay. So I've done the big gig on the beach in Bali. I've spoken to the world surfing community. There's a lot of very wealthy people in the surfing community, from the owners of all these big companies all the way through down the line. Even pro surfers today are making a lot of money. If you're in the top 10, you're in the tens of millions of dollars a year easily. So I'm thinking from this, and I was a keynote speaker at this event, and the guy sitting next to me on the stool outside with the Nev house behind me that we'd be built with live streaming globally, I can't remember his name, but he was one of the head designers for Apple. And he was a very wealthy guy, and so were a lot of other people in the audience, ex-Silicon Valley people. And I had one of my surfboards at my feet, and it said NEV Futureshapes. And as we're chatting, he's going, I'm setting up a new company to make electric bikes to save the environment. They're going to be made out of recycled plastic. And I thought, great. And he said, it's going to be called Futureshapes. And I broke up laughing, and everybody's looking at me, and I'm going, well, you're going to owe me a royalty. Look at this surfboard. I named my board NEV Futureshapes back in 1980. So we had a good laugh. The other thing about this community, and again, I'm not knocking it, but I did at the Ubud Green School, this amazing school. Google it. It is unbelievable, made out of bamboo. And there was all these presentations about plastics and everything, and I had a full plan ready to go to work with a Reef Rabik to build a plant down near where we were to take all the waste. We were going to have these little Nev houses built that people would bring their plastic waste in the bags. It would be shredded and ground, and we would pay the people 5,000 rupiah a kilo for the bags. And I don't care if the people chuck sand in the bottom to make it heavier. This is a loss leader for the company. This is to get waste out of the environment. We can get our plastic waste from other places too. So this was the plan. So I've just done all these presentations, and I'm sitting with this guy after, like he asked me, can we have a chat? So I'm sitting with him, having a cup of coffee, and I hope he's not listening to this because he might remember this, but it was kind of funny. He's sitting there, and I'm running a risk here, but anyway, he's got his white t-shirt on, he's got his puka shells, he's got his Birkenstocks, his long hair, great guy, and his two beautiful boys come rocking up. They're like 6 and 9, blonde hair, same sort of setup, and And I know this guy's worth a lot of money. And he's living the dream, living in Bali with his family, surfing, blah, blah, blah. And he says, Nev, I understood what you said about the product. It's fantastic, great. And he grabbed one of my samples and held it up. And he said, but, Nev, if I drill a hole into that panel to hang a picture, then what's inside is going to VOC, it's going to off-gas. And, and he kind of basically said in his own words, you're going to poison my children as they're sleeping.
Right.
And I said, I was getting ready to lose it. And I just went, John, whatever his name was, how'd you get here today? He goes, yeah, because I knew he lived in Seminyak. And I said, he said, I come up on my scooter. And he said, oh, did you come up from Cooter on your scooter? And he laughed, and we had a bit of a laugh. I said, you know that hour and a quarter it took you to get up here and all that traffic, you've been sitting behind the most disgusting belching trucks that you've ever known, sucking up more carbon monoxide than you could possibly imagine. And also the air quality in Bali is worse than the air quality in Jakarta because they burn rice paddies and they burn their plastic.
Mm-hmm.
And you're worried about what I've just explained to you in very clear terms, that what's inside that panel is 70 to 80% polyethylene and polypropylene, which are the safe plastics that you sit in and around every single day of your life. And the nasties that you're worried about that may off-gas or not are in the bottom 20 to 30%. And they are a percentage of a percentage. So what's in that bottom 20 to 30% is soil, PVC, styrenes, dead dog, whatever is in that bottom 30%. So what's in that panel that's likely to VOC is so diluted, it's ridiculous. And it's encapsulated. You have 3 to 4 millimeters of virgin polymer or a bioplastic on the surface, and inside you have polyethylene and polypropylene mainly, and then these other things. It's not a worry. Please give me a little bit of credit to know that the science behind this product is safe. And the fact that you sit in an aeroplane, in a car, in your house, and the paint that's on the wall in this place, and the carpet, it's full of plastics.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Everything is full of plastics.
Yep.
Plastic is not evil. It is the improper disposal of plastic that is. So why does that lead into further into my journey with the surfing community? Maybe this will trigger some people. I've been reaching out for years, but specifically over the last 12 months, to simply talk to my peers in my industry, just to talk about it, to say, hey guys, I love what you're doing. I respect the fact that, let me give you a better example. There was an Instagram post on a fantastic group called Sungai Watch in Bali. And Sungai Watch are two brothers and a sister that have set up this non-for-profit, and they are literally cleaning all the rivers and beaches in Bali on steroids. They are just amazing. They've got a huge following. They've got people saying, you guys are gods. We love you. Thank you so much for what you're doing. This is just amazing. And it is, right? Pats on the back. Thank you. I posted a comment, and a lot of the surfing community read this, from Kelly to a whole bunch of people, really smart people that really want to do some good. And I said, guys, this is fantastic what you're doing, blah, blah, blah. Maybe I was a bit short on that. But I said, what we got to do is address the real problem here. And that is, we need to address the problem at the source. And I have a solution. And could someone could you DM me? I'll explain. Now, I've done that in my surfing community. I've done that in the Australian government. I've sent messages out when I've seen the program on TV about wasting the environment and plastic and all these emotive stories. And I've reached out to people in 101 ways, just not with a big spiel like I've sent you and others. Just, I have a solution. Could you please contact me? And it's roughly this. Now, it's crickets out there. No one is coming back to me. And it's if I got one person in my tribe that started talking about what Nev's doing, not for my ego, but just as a solution to what others are doing, it's like with Boyan Slats with his big ocean cleanup thing, with Kelly going down there in California and seeing the big machine up and down and going, wow, mate, this is fantastic. And and I'm not knocking, this is great. This is exactly what Boyan needs, is the personality like Kelly to talk about it. But they're talking about the Band-Aid. Now, Kelly Slater bought my company. Now, it wasn't my company when he bought it. I was a shareholder, but I started it. Kelly's a mate. I've made him surfboards over the years, and I'm not knocking Kelly. He's a busy guy. He is a great human doing good things for the environment, for surfing, etc. He's a legend. All I want to do is talk to Kelly. All I want to do is talk to Von from Patagonia. All I want to do is talk to people in my industry that can see that there's a possibility that Nev has got a solution here. Now, I respect and understand that some of these people, my friends, my peers, may have read that article in 2021 and made up their own minds that maybe Nev's not to be trusted. Maybe he's full of shit. And that breaks my heart because I know it's completely and utterly not true, and I'm doing everything a human can possibly do to get this technology off the ground. And it's not getting it off the ground, it's existing technology that can be delivered. It's not building a sieve in the Pacific. It's not building a big new boat that costs X amount of millions. It's literally pay for the machine, it will be delivered, and the day that it opens, we will be operating and we will be making a profit. And it is profitable. Like, oh my God, someone just talk to me, is what I'm saying. But, I respect the idea that, I can't get in front of Von from Patagonia. And he's giving away his fortune daily. And he's wanting to remove CO2 from the environment. This does that.
So the focal point is your pilot plant. That's where we're at today.
Correct. Yep. Get a pilot plant up and running. This is a domino principle. Like I have so many people around the world that are either actively saying or are thinking or have probably completely forgotten about me, but are going, geez, I wish Nev had pulled that off, or what's he doing with it, or what's going on. The moment that we operate our first plant and people are walking around in it and seeing what we can do and seeing that it's profitable and seeing that we can make concrete blocks for houses for the poor if necessary, I don't want to sound like the classic entrepreneur, but there will be the need for millions of these plants around the world. Millions, not tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands, millions of them. Just think about this. Tennessee has a landfill near Nashville, the Rutherford County landfill. I've met with the mayor of Rutherford County and met with the waste management companies. And I think they got at least 2,000 tonne a day that they've got to deal with. And there's no liner on that landfill. It's destroying the environment, it smells, and the constituents have voted the last mayor in to get rid of it. That's one of thousands of landfills in Tennessee alone. Every landfill should have one of these NoMor facilities on the landfill, diverting MSW waste from the landfill. Oh, hang on, what about commercial industrial waste? What about agricultural waste? What about e-waste? Yep, we can deal with all that too. Agricultural waste is a huge problem. You go out into the whoop or go out the west, go out into the, I keep saying whoop desert, but out into the middle America. And the farmers who are putting plastic over their crops, they burn and bury it. They burn and bury it here in developed nations. They burn and bury it. That's a single polymer that could be turned into product. Soft plastics in Australia, Coles, Woolworths and Aldi did a deal about 5 years ago with a company to take all the soft plastics and recycle them. So all the Australians went to their biggest supermarkets, these are the biggest companies in the country, and were bringing back the soft plastics, mixed films and everything, and putting them in a bin. That was then being taken to be recycled. For about a year or 2 years, they were recycling it into, shipping pallets and bollards and things like that. Then COVID hit and the shit hit the fan. And they were getting too much waste. That waste turned to 12,000 tonne of baled soft plastics being stored all over in factories in New South Wales and Victoria and Australia. Fire hazard, there was a fire, all sorts of drama. The Australian government's freaking out about it. Everybody's still freaking out about it. We could take every skerrick of those 12,000 tonne of plastic and turn it into product. That's what I'm saying. We've got the solution. I just need a voice. And I know I'm going to get it. This is a great start. And I've got,
Yeah.
But I need to get my story out to my tribe, because they do have a say. If I could, and this is not a message to Von, because I've spoken to people in Patagonia and I don't want to upset them, but Von's an amazing human that is probably fly fishing at the moment somewhere in wherever and enjoying his life. And he should, every second of it. He's giving away his fortune to save the planet. But I'm telling you, Von, engage with the NoMor solution and you will, in time, reduce more CO2 out of the environment and build more homes for the poor in Patagonia or wherever it might be than you could ever do with any other form of dealing with waste. I'm putting that out there. Someone else out there who's listening, tell me a better solution than taking everyday household waste, safely turning it into a product that embodies the carbon permanently, that if that product has to be recycled, can be simply ground down again and recycled again, and from that product build homes for the poor. Build one in San Francisco where you've got the housing problem. Build one in LA for the homeless. And let a non-for-profit get the gate fees that should be getting paid, that the local county has to pay. Divert that to the non-for-profit. Let them process that waste at a non-for-profit. Turn that waste into a product like a block or a specific panel.
Mm-hmm.
Then give it. Build a community that's not a shitbox community where it's not in my backyard situation. Build for these people. It's too expensive. I've met with people in LA, the housing commission, the homeless housing commissions. I've met with them. I know the problem that you guys have got. It's too expensive to build. It costs $60,000 to build a small little tiny house. Not with our system. If it was set up the right way, even if it was at a loss, it would still be not as much loss than what it costs a local county to get rid of that MSW in the first place. It would still be ahead of that. So even if you ran it at a loss and had to bring in capital to keep you'd provide jobs, low-skilled local jobs, and the product that comes off the line will be a block, 12,000 blocks a day from our smallest plant that could build homes for the veterans, for the indigenous in the reservations. The reservations that have significant income coming from casinos and things like that.
Casinos, yeah.
Yeah, they could invest in one of these plants, run it as a non-for-profit, and build homes for their people. And if anybody out there says, I'm talking shit, talk to me. I challenge you to talk to me.
So what are the next 3 steps, or 2 steps, or 1 step? What is for this pilot plant? It's a domino moment, right?
Yeah.
You've got the Category 5 certification. You've got this stuff happening in these different places around the world where these plants are tourable. You have the ability to commercialize this. What is the next 1, 2, or 3 steps to get this going?
Yeah. Well, we're well into the first step, which is finalizing the message, because the message was too complicated before. So that brings us to what I said before about NoMor, and people now can buy into the idea that if I invest in this solution, I can solve my problem, but I can also save all these other problems too. Now, the reason I said that is that 2 things happened over the last 4 years with 2 multinationals. I was invited by IKEA to go and visit their plant in Sydney, this giant, biggest building I've ever been in, plant in Sydney. And I walked around the plant and with the head of sustainability, and she said to me, this is when it wasn't NoMor, it was just CRPP. And they said, Mr. Hyman, can you take all of this plastic that gets picked up every day by Visi? So it's got to be trucked from here to there, and it's cost a lot of money, and we're over it. We just want this, we want to deal with it. And it was all clean plastic, like plastic bags and strapping and things like that. And I said, sure, we can build a plant right on your back door, through that big roller door there. We can put all of that plastic through the system, then we can turn it into whatever product you want to sell in your store right out there. So nothing happened there because we didn't have a plant you could walk through, right? This, about 2 months ago, I was approached by a company, and I don't mind naming them, called Kingspan. Now, Kingspan are based in Ireland. It's an $8 billion a year company, and they make insulation boards for housing in the construction industry. They've got Kingspan in Australia. They're in the US and etc. But what they liked about what they saw about our tech for the plastics recycling side of things, which they completely get, they went to the US, to the UK plant. They said, "Can we do this? Are you prepared to do this? We'll fund it." And that's what I wanted to hear. We will fund it, but can you do it? And I said, "Sure, we can order that line and build it here." But I just want to tell you one more thing. Instead of just getting the plastics recycling thing, which is taking your single polymer waste that you want to get rid of, we can also bring in all these other plastics and do other things. And he said, "Great, that's fantastic, good." And then I said, "But will you consider NoMor, which is this? Instead of getting our plastic from other places, we bring NoMor in, we bring in the Z1 line, and we take all of the local MSW waste. So we're getting your waste being trucked to us from your facility, but we're getting all the MSW waste, which includes all the other plastics. So that's our source, and we get all this waste, and we turn all of that at a profit into product that you can use in your building industry, concrete blocks, because you need those." And I'm meeting with them next week in Sydney, next Thursday. That's one, and I've got 3 other groups that are looking at us. We're finishing the financials, but our current financials that you've seen are just a ballpark financial scenario. And the reason they're a ballpark is that there's so many different iterations of this. Like, if a local county or council bought in, they would probably provide the land and the building. So we don't need to have that in the financials. There might be a waste to energy solution for the power. There might be this, that, and the other. There's a whole bunch of different things that I can't put into a business plan unless I know who the client is. But with the information that I've pulled together with my team, we can show very clearly that it's profitable, even paying rent, even paying this and paying that. So that's step one of getting a plant operating, getting a contract signed, ordering the lines and going through that process, none of which is a concern of mine, because each of all of that technology is proven, and the experts from both of those plants will be on site delivering the technology just like they do in any other industry. And so there's no R&D required. Where the research and development is required is where you go further up that pyramid I was talking about before. So where you get to Nev House. So Nev House is still in the picture. It's because the panels that we won the awards for, the single panel that can be the floor, wall, or roof panel, we still need to do R&D and testing to be able to meet the local building codes. We know we can achieve it, but we can't go in with an Australian panel or some panel from Kentucky that we've made to go to Tennessee because it's got a different building code. Every state in the US has got a different building code, or something like that. So the next stage is to once we have a plant operating, then success is my vindication. So I can start telling the world boldly, more boldly than I'm trying to do now, that we've got the solution, even though I know we have the solution. But when we have a plant operating all under one roof, delivering, that's stage 2. Stage 3 will be, how do we scale? How do we keep up with this? Because that's what's going to happen. I have absolutely no doubt that when we walk sheikhs from the UAE or people from Europe or waste management systems in the US through one of our plants or whatever it might be, there's going to be significant demand for these facilities. And I have really heavy industrial facilities potentially ready to start rolling these out on scale. One of them's based in the UAE that I've been to. It's the largest fabrication company in North Africa. So anything heavy metal sounds good. Anything heavy metal, like building garbage trucks through the sheikhs, bulletproof things through to scaffolding. That's what these people do. So, and because of my journey over the last 5, 6, 7 years, and all the people that I've met, like I was saying before, I can just start emailing people. My email list is kind of, I've got banks and family offices and all these people that really loved what I was going towards in 2017, 18.
Yeah.
And they will be really pleased to hear from me when I can prove that this is definitely a goer.
Well, I know listeners of this podcast are also going to be anxious that I've introduced you to some back when we were in San Francisco together. And to know that you're still hanging in there, getting to this pivotal moment is really incredible. Can we wrap with the Surf Lakes bit, and then I'll transition to some of the final questions for you.
Well, really briefly, I got involved because I had a passion for it and developed from 1999 onwards, and that eventuated through what Kelly Slater's done with his surf ranch wave pools, with Wave Garden, and I've aligned myself with a company called Surf Lakes, really worth Googling. Now, I believe very strongly that artificial wave pools are going to be the future of entertainment, not surfing, the future of entertainment globally. Because when you think about it, theme parks, everybody wants to go to a theme park if they've got kids. And everybody wants to go to somewhere where there's going to be some form of water and sort of entertainment around water. Now, this is not about surfing. I sat in front of 50 PricewaterhouseCoopers investors who I said, I want to bring a wave pool to Luxembourg. And you should have seen the blood draining out of their heads. It's because everybody wants to be a bit around water. A wave pool will have all the infrastructure to have coffee and food and all that sort of typical stuff, but it'll have professional surfers surfing, average surfers surfing, beginners surfers surfing, absolute beginners who've never even touched the water before will be able to get in the pool. There'll be all forms of entertainment for the kids, etc. And I guarantee those people in that room that within 10, 15 minutes, maybe a bit longer with one or two other people in the room, I'll have every one of those people standing up on a wave in that period of time. Whereas in the ocean, it takes weeks and weeks, if not months, to get someone even to stand up on a surfboard sometimes because it's so complex in the ocean. This is the future. There will be wave pools in Mongolia, in Kazakhstan. There will be wave pools in LA. There already are. Wave pools everywhere. Mark my words. That's what's going to happen.
But the ones that are the ones that Kelly Slater are aligned with, I'm not sure if he's owner of one of the brands that does it, but it's really expensive.
Oh no, absolutely. Now, what Kelly's got is the world's most dynamic, amazing, incredible long wave, perfect wave. The average surfer cannot surf that wave. A very good surfer will struggle, and you can have a bit of beginners. So basically what Kelly's done, he's got a complicated technology that must be built in an environment where there is wealth. It's got to go on the back of a golf course or with a golf course. It's high net worths who buy property and get access and things like that, which is fine, and that's okay. But wave pools for the average person, that's why Surf Lakes is so amazing, because the cost of going to a Surf Lakes pool will be no more than a day at Dreamworld or Disneyland, or less probably. Whereas Kelly's pool, it's a commercial thing. It's like tens of thousands of dollars a day or whatever it is. I don't know. He's just opened one in Dubai, in Abu Dhabi, I mean. So Kelly's doing really well, and it is his company. All credit to him. But wave pools will also be for the masses, no doubt. Wave Garden is to a point. Surf Lakes will definitely be, because Surf Lakes is a circle, and it has 5 different waves breaking at one time, and the swell is more like a real swell that comes from the ocean, and that swell will dissipate into a channel, which will just be a simple little channel where the kids on their foamies can bob up and down with mum drinking their pina coladas and having a great time, while she looks over to her right and sees Kelly Slater or the world's best surfers ripping on a wave. They'll have all of that and everything in between. Watching Johnny, who's 10, learning how to surf 20 meters away. It's I'm so excited about it. That the future of surfing, the future of entertainment around water, is all around and only around artificial wave pools. So,
And you're
quote
tied
me
in
on
with
that.
these guys. You're tied in with this group.
I'm a strategic advisor for Surf Lakes, and I am an investor with them, and I love it. It's just so exciting.
That's awesome. Well, people can look that up. I'll put this in the show notes as well.
Yeah.
Why don't we transition then? I want to ask you, and the funny thing is you've been through so much already as it relates to horror stories that you've seen or been a part of. So I'm going to skip that question because
Yeah.
I think that we've gone through a whole lot of that. And I'm wondering, on the flip side, what's the biggest hiring success story that you've ever heard or seen? And what do you think the secret to that being so successful was?
Yeah. Good one. I think I'm going to put it down to a guy that came in and basically strategized my company. His name's Austin Whitaker. He's the guy that I mentioned earlier. And this is a hiring situation, right? So after me sacking the last CEO, I needed 2 directors to come on board. Now, how do you find directors to come on board with a company that is going to go through litigation? So Austin, I'd been with Austin 2 or 3 years beforehand. He had seen the journey, and he just said, "Nev, I'm seeing what's going on. I'm in. I'll come on board as a director." And then Leon Steffen said the same thing. So I had my directors. But Austin, his history is that, as I said, he was a New South Wales detective. Then he was a commando, or maybe vice versa, I'm not sure, before or after. Commando. He trained SAS in Australia, which is the equivalent of the Navy SEALs in the US. He worked with the Navy SEALs. He worked with the FBI. He's done all of that. He's a strategist. He's calm. He's collected. I'm emotive. I'm a big thinker, and I'm, all of that sort of stuff. So he's come in and just basically said, yes, no, yeah, we'll do that, yeah, Nev, no worries. But he's never been the type to demand or he'll quietly say, this is where I think we should go, and it has been amazing to watch. And he did this for nothing. He knew he would get a reward one day, but he didn't say, look, I earn this amount, you got to pay. No, I'm in, mate. I'm going to make this work for you. And he has. So, he's amazing. And he's no longer with us. He's moved on to a gig in Papua New Guinea, but he's still consulting with us and still being there for us, etc. But, hiring, if it's specifically about who I've hired, the people that I've got working with me with NoMor now, and I'll say them again, it's Austin Whitaker, Leon Steffen, Graham Hyman, my brother, Matt Henry. These guys they've been my back, my rock. In the surfing scene, I've very rarely hired people, but there's one guy I want to mention, and that is Phil Usher. Now, Phil and I worked together as we were at school together. He had a baby when all of that stuff I told you before. But before he started Odyssey Private Aged Care, I hired him in the early 80s. I hired him in the late 80s, 87, as a general manager of my company. And he was an amazing manager. However, there was a fallout with my first wife, and there was a bit of tension in that relationship. And I had to sack him, which was really tough. And I didn't see Phil for 10 years until I had left my first wife. And then Phil and I connected again. And over that period of time, Phil developed all these other businesses in the building industry, and then he's built this company called Odyssey Private Aged Care. And he's killing it. And to me, had I stayed with Phil all the way through, a lot of things wouldn't have happened. But if we had remained partners, he as my manager, me as the bigger thinker, and he was a surfboard shaper too. He understood and surfer with me and everything. Then things would have been different or better or whatever. Who knows? No one has a crystal ball. anything could have happened. And this is not hindsight. I'm not wishing that happened. But I'm just saying, when you're thinking about hiring people, I haven't hired that many people in my life, really, to be honest. I've had staff and things like that. But people that have really stood out to me is Phil and Austin.
Amazing. You've told so many stories in this interview today. I'm curious if there's anything left in your library mentally, something that's happened to you in your life or career that few people will believe, or if you want to anchor to one of the stories you've told earlier, um, that's fine too.
Well, let's leave it on a funny note. I like, as I said before, I like laughing at myself. I like wondering why maybe I've done things in a certain way,
Yeah.
and I'm going to bring it back to the world's biggest surfboard. Like,
Hmm.
what? Like, what? Like, what are you doing, Nev? Okay, so how that started was in 1994, I was setting up a new retail, a destination surf shop on the Gold Coast Highway. Beautiful new big building, purpose built, and we needed to create a facade for the building. And I thought, damn it, I'm going to make a big surfboard. So I designed a 25-foot long surfboard, and also designed a wave as the facade for the building, like this big. I'll send you photos of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we made this 25-foot surfboard, and it doesn't sound like much, but a 25-foot surfboard is huge. And I hand shaped that surfboard, took it down to Snapper Rocks, which is a famous wave here, 20 minutes drive from here, and we got 9 surfers on that board, and we towed it in with a small jet ski, and they were world famous surfers at the time, and we all thought that was funny. We drove it down the highway, stuck it on the outside of the shop, and then it became a destination. On that same day, we closed the highway, put it up on the front of the shop, and then my shop became this awesome retail. Many years went by, and then in 2004, after the divorce and all the other drama, I had to reinvent myself a little. And I got a call from a wine company, who said, look, we know that you made a big surfboard, and we're launching this new beer, and we would like you to make I think it was a wine they were launching. It was Tui's, I think it was. And they said, we want to, and so would you make another big surfboard? But this one, we want it to be 40 feet long. And I went, yeah, as long as you pay me to do it. So they did. They started paying me, and I ordered all the materials. I actually made this surfboard out the back of the shop under this big marquee, and everybody was coming by and watching it being made. It was an environmental disaster because I used a blowing foam for the board, and it was like the world's worst surfboard. But anyway, cut a very long story short, shaped the surfboard, made it. Just as I'm waiting for the final check from these people to pay me for the board, they said, we've just had a board of directors meeting. We're sorry, Mr. Hyman, but we're going to put it off this promotion until next year. And I went, what? So I went, oh my God. So the Stubbies surfing event's coming up in about 3 months. And I went to, not the Stubbies, it was called the Quicksilver Pro, same sort of event at Burleigh Heads. No, it's Snapper. And I said, hey, Quicksilver, if I put a big Quicksilver logo on the nose of this board, can I bring it down and we can surf it and try and get a Guinness World Record? And they said, oh, yeah, I guess so. So I contacted Guinness in the UK. They came out, finished the board, took it around at 3 o'clock in the morning, got my son, who was only about 8 or 9 at the time, put him on the board. We towed it around, made sure it floated. Of course, it was going to float. It weighed a ton. It was 40 foot long, super, it was a normal surfboard blown up to be that board. And I designed it on CAD, on Shape 3D. So I phoned Quicksilver and I said, hey guys, I've got the board. Wake up, I'm coming around with the board. It was a Sunday. And the guy said from Quicksilver goes, hey Nev, oh mate, I don't know, geez, I don't know if we're going to be able to fit it in today. No, we might not be able to do it. I'm going, mate, you can't. I'm coming around. So this board was on a flatbed truck. We drove it around the corner, and he's up on a balcony with his phone, and he's going, and then he sees the board and loses it and goes, bring it in, bring it in. So we bring it in, we got it on the water, we got 47 people on the board, got all this fantastic imagery. We got Guinness World Records for the largest surfboard and the most amount of surfers on the board. Then I put it in a 40-foot container and shipped it to California and took it to Huntington Beach and we got 60 people on the board at Huntington Beach. Almost killed a whole bunch of people because basically what happened was, seriously, this is no joke. It was during the US Open of surfing, the biggest surfing contest in the world. There was like about 100,000 people on the beach. Everyone was on the beach. Everyone from Honda to all the big clothing companies. That was all the big trade fair thing. There was people racked down Huntington Pier. You couldn't move on Huntington Pier. But there's 20,000 people on the shoreline watching this board being towed out by a jet ski. We get it out to the end of Huntington Pier. A guy did the swell forecast, said, Nev, there's a wave coming now. All the lifeguards were on the board. We had 70 people on it. I had to elbow people off because we were sinking. It was the 60th anniversary of the United Nations, so that's why I wanted 60 people on it for all the press that we were going to get. Then this wave came. The wave came and went under us. We couldn't keep up with the wave, and then it broke ahead of us. Now, the jet ski's on the other side of the whitewater, going towards the beach. He's towing it, and he's trying to pull us up the back of the wave. I've got photos to prove this. Goes up the back of the wave, and he couldn't get us over the wave, and it was only about 3 foot or something. And the board pulled backwards and ripped him off the ski. And I'm going, we're going to go sideways. The board's going to roll in sideways and kill 10 kids. I'm going to be all over, my life's ruined. The head lifeguard gets back on the ski. He hooks the thing back on again, gets it going, just gets the board going just before the next wave came. And we caught the wave and rode it for 12 seconds until the big fins hit the sand well before the water's edge. And everybody stopped and everybody fell off and on top of each other and laughing and it was IMG said they got more publicity out of that event than any time that the US Open has run. It was on newspapers all over the world, the Jerusalem Post, it was on the New York Times, it was the world's biggest surfboard. So the story kind of gets a little bit better. So that happened. We had the board. I delivered the board back to this guy who had helped us with the monster truck, gave it to him. He owned a farm in Corona, east of LA. I'm not making that up. The suburb's called Corona. At that time, we had changed the name to Firewire. So Mark Price from Firewire said, Nev, we don't want the big board anymore. It's a bit corny. Okay, we did it. It's all good. So I gave it to this guy. He said, I'll keep it. I'll use it. And he had this big farm, meaning a dairy farm, a Land of Lakes dairy farm. And we left the board there. 10 years later, I get a call from Peter Townend, PT, the famous surfer from Australia, who lives in California. And he works for the Huntington Beach Association of Tourism or something. He goes, Nev, we're going to do the 100th anniversary of surfing in California. Where's the big board? And I said, mate, I don't know. It's in this suburb east of LA. I even forgot the name of the suburb because it was before Corona. And so I went, how can I find this board? I went back through my emails. I couldn't find anything. So I went to Google Maps and I zoomed in on California. I zoomed in east of LA. I zoomed in more. And I went, oh my God, there's the rectangle of the property. I think that's the property. I zoomed in. Oh my God, there it is. I found the board on Google Maps. And so then I called PT. I said, PT, I found the board. Here's the address. The guy's name's Brad Leal. He's a bit eccentric. He's worth a lot of money, but it's kind of like Beverly Hillbillies. When you get there, you'll know what I mean, right? So I didn't know in the meantime his mother, at 95, had died, and he was losing his mind himself. So PT rocks up with a buddy, goes to the gate, and hits the buzzer. Zzz, zzz. Now, they can see through the gate the board in amongst old farming machinery and stuff. And they go, and then you hear this, they hear this, fuck off. And the PT goes, oh, hang on, zzz, zzz, fuck off. Actually, my name's Peter Townend and I'm here on behalf of Nev Hyman. I'm just wondering whether we could talk to you about the big, fuck off. The guy came out, this is no word of a lie, he comes out with a shotgun. So PT just went, we're out. He rang me and told me the whole story. I couldn't believe it. Then we got the guys. I designed a new board, designed it on CAD, and up in Maine, where they make all the America's Cup yachts, there's a company, I can't remember the name of it. They cut out of foam the hulls of super yachts in this big giant computer shaping machine. So they cut the board that I designed, shipped it to California. It got glassed. We put it in the water for this special event. There was probably about 15,000 people there, and we got 64 people on it and got more Guinness World Records, and it's now hanging on the International Surfing Museum in Huntington Beach. So people ask me, Nev, what's wrong with you? Why did you do all that? What drugs are you on? Like, what are you doing? It's about branding. It's all about branding, and you never know what can come from something funny.
I'd like to ask about your most exciting 5-year crystal ball outcome. What does that look like, whether it's a business or personal objective?
Yeah, actually, that's a really good question. So I tell you, the excitement that I'm getting from re-engaging with my tribe, sounds corny, but re-engaging with surfing. Like last night I was down at the Surfboard Factory and we're all standing around chatting. There's a guy there from Venezuela who he had heard about me in 1993 because I ran the first professional surfing contest in Venezuela in 1993, and he said his career was kind of built on the fact that you did the first event there. And so there's a little bit of ego there, a lot. There's great camaraderie. There's these guys that I've known for a long time where we're doing something crafty, we're showing off our craft. So to be able to do that globally, to be able to go to Japan or France or Ecuador or somewhere and see one of my Burley board makers facilities operating, or in Hawaii, I know that's going to happen. I just know it's going to happen. That would be a dream for me because I love people. I love hanging out. I love all of that. As far as NoMor is concerned, I really enjoy public speaking. I enjoy doing this type of thing. I enjoy telling stories. People say, I mean, everyone can tell stories, and there's a lot better than me, but I've always got a story to tell. So some people raise their eyebrows, like my lovely wife. Oh no, here we go again. Or other people who have never met me go, oh my God, like that's funny. So I love talking. So my dream with NoMor would be that there would be plants operating and making a difference in developed nations, but so much more important for me to see developing nations solve a problem that everybody's screaming about. And the solution to the problem is really simple. I'm not going to go over it again, but I'm telling you, the solution to plastic waste in the environment is stopping it at its source. End of story. My dream will come true. And I'm going to live for a long time unless I get hit by a truck. I'm going to live for a long time because I'm healthy. I know that technology is going to get us to live longer, and I want to live forever. I'd love to live forever. I know some people say, no, I wouldn't want to do that. I love life. I just want to see these things happen. And I'm not saying that I haven't caused some grief to those around me, and I have. But, life's about living and forgetting the past as much as you can and just enjoying what you're doing. So I want to enjoy my wife and my kids. I want to enjoy the world. I want to travel more and more and more. And I want to see people stepping into their new house. When I was in Vanuatu, we delivered the communities in Vanuatu, the community centres, over 5 nakamals. Nakamal is a village. There was 5 villages on this incredibly remote island called Tanna Island. Google it. It'll blow your mind. There's an active volcano that you can stand on the corner of and look down inside. There's got good surf. There's the indigenous peoples still wear grass skirts, and they have these incredible, oh my God, it's just the most remarkable place. And it's 2.5 hours from Sydney by flight. It's ridiculous. It's right there. It's almost like you step back in time. And when we delivered the community centres and people walked in, all the kids were running around. And I had my son, Jaden, at the time following me with a drone, because in one of the nakamals I said, we just got to go down here. I want to go and look at this one. I haven't seen this one that my team had built, but I hadn't seen it finished. And he's flying above me, and I'm walking down. And as I get to the nakamal, there's no one there. They're all over at the big ceremony, the big, giant, unbelievable ceremony when you see the photos on my website. When you go, and there's no one there. And I went, wow, look at this. And I started walking towards the Nev house, which was going to be a little clinic. And all these kids ran out of the bush. They were a bit scared at first. And these kids ran out and they started running around in a circle around me, which is what we were doing in the big group, with like this indigenous way of celebrating. Everybody stomping in a giant circle of about 1,000 people. These kids started doing it around me. And then I grabbed them and walked them up. Sorry, I'm choking up again. It was such a good feeling. And that emotion is caught up in the fact that I haven't been able to deliver stage 2 of that in that incredible country. And the reason I don't want to sound bitter or angry, but the reason I haven't been able to deliver is because of 2 selfish bastards. So you might want to cut that out, but that's the reason. It's the sole reason. Three very selfish people who put themselves before the company and my shareholders. So, yeah, to see those kids so happy was just amazing. And that's what I want to. That's what I'd love to do, to see that happening around the world.
To see that through. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
If you could go back and tell yourself one thing early in your career, what would you say? One thing.
I'd have to agree with myself and just say never. I don't believe in hindsight. I really don't. I don't believe that it's a decision that you may have made was wrong at the time. That you shouldn't have made that decision, because at the point of making a decision in life, there is all these other mitigating circumstances around that decision. Unless it's evil. I'm not talking about that. But so I would just say, never say never. Just keep doing what you're doing. Just follow it through. If it's good,
And what
make it happen.
and what advice would you give to a brand new entrepreneur who's just starting out?
Keep your radar on. Take every meeting that you have with anybody that you meet, and either take notes or keep something from the meeting as a trigger, and keep that door open. Never close the door on something that may or may not have been beneficial. Just that person or that thing will come back and benefit you if you keep your radar on. Not follow negative shit down a rabbit hole, and not listen to people around you. No, listen to your peers, listen to your wife, listen to your friends. If they honestly listen to your kids, my kids and my wife, they're my mentors. My kids give me advice that is gold now at my age. So I listen to my kids for advice. Don't always agree with them, but you know what my son calls. I call my son. My son Jaden he's finishing his PhD. He's incredible. He's finishing his PhD on deep sea mining and the environment and the whole thing. And he is, again, a little bit like my brother, the yin and the yang. I've named him Neville's Advocate, because he always takes the other side. He's always giving me the other side of the argument. And I just love it. Instead of Devil's Advocate, it's Neville's Advocate.
I love that. And what
Yeah.
advice would you offer to an emerging entrepreneur about building and leading a successful company?
Just try and bring good people around you. I mean, the only reason I've survived, the only reason, is not through my skill or personality or luck or effort. It's through good people looking through all the shit and believing in you, and then you being able to take their advice and move forward. I had my architect say to me once. We went to Hassel's, the architectural firm, and we had determined back in 2014 or 15 that we couldn't build a house out of plastic. We won't be able to get the structural integrity. So they came up to me before the meeting and said, Nev, we're not going to use plastic for the frame, we're going to use wood. And I went, no, we can't do that. And Ken McBride and the other guy said to me, Nev, get over yourself. And that still rings in my ears. Get over yourself. Because an entrepreneur, a founder especially, it gets so caught up in themselves and what they're bringing to the table, they don't listen to the smarter people in the room around them. So that's what I would advise. And I can't say that I've been, right that I've listened every time, or that I've taken it on board. Sometimes it's like when the guys from Firewire said, "No, we can't use Firewire. We're going to call it Nev." I got over myself in less than 5 minutes and said, "Yeah, let's do it." But at other times, I haven't listened.
What final thoughts would you like to share with our listeners?
Um, um, I don't know. Like it does really come down to just loving the moment. Just love the moment. I've suffered from a little bit of depression, not as in depressed, not in diagnosed, and thought about things in the past and all that sort of stuff. But the world's a beautiful place, and most people are good people. The majority, all the stuff that we see on TV every day, and all the shit that's going on around the world, you walk down the street and bump into somebody, 99.9% of the time, he or she is a good person. So just focus on that. Focus on good people. Hang out with good people. I've had my fair share of bad people that have caused me grief, and I shouldn't have hung out with them as much. But life is just too pleasant if you just are active and hang out with good people. Some people have issues, some people have more concerns around their DNA and causing mental health issues and all that sort of stuff, and that I can't deal with. I can't offer advice for that, but good comes from bad. Bad things happen, keep going. Another bad things happen, something great happens. Oh my God. Then something bad happens, and that's just life.
There's a surfing philosopher behind that.
Yeah. Just one more wave. There's always going to be another wave. Even if you miss that one and your best friend got it and you didn't, there's going to be another one. So,
Well, thank you for that. How can our listeners contact you or find out more about what you've talked about today? We're going to put everything in the show notes anyway, but I'll give you a quick chance to plug, if you want to do Burley
sure.
Board Makers and also NoMor.
Yeah. Well, I mean, personally, and I have no problem with people contacting me personally, it's just Nev Hyman, spelling Hyman, at me.com. That's personal. And for business, it's nev at nomor.com.au. And with Burley Boardmakers, it is, actually, it's not Burley Boardmakers. Find me on nevcustoms.com. So it's NEV Customs, customs.com. And Nev Customs is worth having a good look at. And then Nev House, so there's a lot, isn't there? Nev House needs to be upgraded, the website, but there's a lot of good information on there about Nev House and what we delivered in Vanuatu and things like that. And that's just nev.hyman at nevhouse.com. So that was a mixture of emails and websites, but it'll all be...
We'll put them in the show notes so everybody can direct themselves where they want to go. So Nev, in just in terms of wrapping this up, the one thing I want to say is I hope you'll come back, because I plan to have these conversations ongoing. And I think the work that you're doing in the world, it's really important. It inspired me.
Thanks.
That's why I reached out to you. We became friends. You stayed in my home with my children, and we spent that time together, and we stayed in touch over the...
I couldn't use Alexa. Now I kept getting closer and closer and yelling at Alexa like an old man. Can she hear me?
Well, we've stayed in touch, and I know there's more than enough time for each of these things to come to pass. And your tenacity, your spirit, your love of life, your genuine nature. I can't think of a person that I would want to have on this podcast as much as I've enjoyed having you here. So thank you for your time. This has been a marathon. I'm sure those who've made it through this whole thing, congratulations. Hopefully this will help get the message out there so people can help take advantage of what you're providing. So thank you so much.
And that's a wrap on this episode of the Bear Hug Experience. Thank you so much for joining us. If you enjoyed what you heard today, please give us a like, click, follow, or subscribe. We appreciate you taking a moment to give us a quick rating and a written review so we can continue to expand our reach and inspire the next generation of leaders to help make this world a better place. You can also contribute to the conversation around this specific episode by using the comments section at whatever platform you're on. And last but not least, if you have direct feedback, a question, or a guest you'd like to suggest that we have on the show, please shoot us an email at podcast@bearhugrecruiting.com or visit bearhugrecruiting.com/podcast. Thanks so much for listening, and we look forward to having you join us again on another episode of the Bear Hug Experience.